What's good, Ivy Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Brian. I'm Vince, and we are here for your listening and viewing pleasure. Probably more listening than viewing, but that's okay. Welcome.
Facts.
It is.
Facts.
It is. Hey, you know what? If you can't laugh at yourself,
People
what are you
don't come to the channel for
No.
aesthetically pleasing good time related to the host. That's why some people are like, nope, I'm only a podcast guy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and I don't blame you.
Understand.
I don't necessarily like looking at myself as we're doing this. So
I love me some me, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there you go.
I'm ready to go. I'm just fired up, man.
Yeah.
We got some fun stuff that
We do. So today we are going to talk about the Notre Dame running back room and the excitement that is the Notre Dame running back room. Look, big losses, obviously, in the running back room, or big loss, I should say, singular, with Audri Estimé. We're going to get into that and how they replace his productivity and what that might look like. And we're going to go through the depth chart, and the running back room is loaded yet again. And so Dylan McCullough has given himself lots of options. Let's just put it that way. And then once we're done with the running back chat, we are going to do some buy, sell, hold, which should be a lot of fun. So jam-packed show for you guys. Looking forward to it. And let's rock and roll, Brian. So today we are talking about the running back room. Lots of good stuff to talk about there. Lots of talent, lots of excitement, lots of varying talent. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
So the attributes that each guy brings to the table are very different, I would say, from one guy to the next. But let's talk overall first, and let's talk about what's not there anymore in Audri Estimé. And, obviously tons of production, great guy to watch the last couple of years, knew what he brought to the table every single day. And we knew that as the game went on, he was going to get stronger and stronger, and defenses were going to get more and more afraid to tackle him, basically. And he's off to the NFL, and they're going to have to find a way to replace his production.
That's going to be the hard thing, right? Like there's two aspects of this, Vince. One is the excitement over, so this is what big time program, it feels like covering a big time program, that you can lose a guy like that and be like, yeah, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did Alabama over the last 15 years lose a stud running back? And you're like, yeah, who's the next 1,000-yard rusher that they're going to have? It's just some other dude. And that's really where Notre Dame is at right now. And look, a lot of credit goes to Dylan McCullough, but I also want to make sure we're giving proper respect to Lance Joseph, who started this thing with Jadarian Price and Audri Estimé, and obviously Logan Diggs was more of a Tommy Rees guy. But, you look at the way that Notre Dame is recruited in recent seasons, they're in a position where you've got big shoes to fill. And it's not a given that those guys are going to be able to fill those shoes because of just how good Audri Estimé was last season. I mean, look, we're excited about what this group can be, but I think it's wise to start with talking about how big of a loss Audric was, because our excitement of how this next group can be can kind of overshadow just how good he was. And it does raise questions about, can this group replace that? I mean, this is a kid last year, Vince, that had 1,341 yards and 18 touchdowns, and he only played 12 games. And then obviously he finished the season off with 238 yards against Stanford in game 12. But if, 1,341 minus 238, that means he was already over 1,000 going into that game. And he actually went over 1,000 in game 11 against Wake Forest. And his numbers should have been better. I mean, like, this is the other thing about Audric that you got to really put into context, is his numbers should have been a lot better. He got benched for about a full quarter and a half almost against Navy because of the fumble.
That's right, because of the fumble.
And he did not put the ball in the ground. To Audric's, like, this is where you say, this is where great players and great coaches come together and become great together. You okay?
I have this incredible itch and a place I can't reach.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and take yourself off the screen and go up against the corner of a wall, and I'll do this.
I'm struggling. Bye.
Okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't concentrate with that going on. I didn't know what Vince was doing. When you look at what a job of a great coach is, the job of a great coach is to say, hey, look, it's my job to get the most out of my. And then it's the job of a player to say, hey, I've got to be coachable and allow myself to be pushed in a way that allows me to then be at my best. And that's kind of what we saw in the opener last year. I mean, expectations were high for Audri Estimé. We all had high expectations for Audri last year. I mean, you go back and listen to our shows from last year. We thought Audri was going to have a big year. He almost gained 1,000 yards the year before in a timeshare, so to speak, in the backfield.
Yeah, it was.
He was going to be the guy. And so when you look at it, you start getting excited and say, hey, look, what was he going to be this year now that he is the guy and he was everything you thought he'd be. And then that first game, he puts the ball on the ground, which was one of the big questions we had about Audri last year. And then he comes in and gets benched for a quarter. And what does he do when he comes back? He just rolls. There's no complaint. Yeah. There's no whining. There was no, he goes for 95 yards on 16 carries against Navy, despite missing a big chunk of that game because he didn't play a whole lot in the fourth quarter either because they had a big lead.
Yeah, exactly.
Out against Tennessee State, rushes for 116 yards and basically a half, right? Then he has that huge run against NC State, goes for 176 against Central Michigan. So he's rolling. And then he goes for 14 carries and 70 yards against Ohio State. And we'll still say the fact that Audri Estimé only had 14 carries and a competitive close loss to Ohio State is a major coaching mistake by the play caller. And we've talked about this a million times when we rehash it. He should have at least 4 more carries at the end of that game. Once he ripped off that long 12-yard run, there's no reason to take him out and put in anyone else. It's lean on your stud and put that game away. So, those are times when he got held back a little bit. Then you look at, the Louisville game, the line just played terrible. He was good against USC, not great. They were committed to stopping the run, which is why so many big play opportunities were open down the field. I mean, you think about it, goes for 95 yards on 22 carries against USC, and the entire defensive game plan was built on stop Audri, which is why Rico Flores got wide open on a 2-hole throw that got set up a touchdown. It's why Chris Tyree was in a one-on-one with no safety help against a nickelback, which went for a big touchdown because they were stopping Audri Estimé. And he still went for 95 yards in that game and didn't play much of the fourth quarter because they were blowing him out. And then you had Jadarian Price's long touchdown run. Then you come out against Clemson, and he only rushes for 17 times for 87 yards. But Vince, he had 82 yards at halftime of that game. But they were 24-6. And so the whole second half was throw, which I think was a mistake because once they had 5 drives in a row where it was an 8-point game. You're a scorer and a 2-pointer away from getting it. Like, there should have been more of Audri in that game. And so those are the frustrating things of saying, like, boy, if he wasn't tamped down by his own coaching staff at times, mainly the play caller, who overall I like, but that was an issue that I had. What would his numbers have looked like?
Sure.
Because the film was outstanding, the things that he did last season as a runner. And so those are some big shoots. It's not just, how you have to replace 1,341 yards and 18 touchdowns. It's also the impact he had, the way that he forced teams to defend Notre Dame. Those are things you look at and say, I think they can replace it, but it's not going to be nearly as easy as maybe we as fans think it can be. And if they accomplish it, it's a testament to the coaching and the players to be able to reach that. It's not just plug and play.
Yeah.
Well, no, you got to plug and play. I mean, it's what you got to do, but it doesn't mean that if they match that production that it was easy. It was an easy thing to do because it won't be. And they're doing that without Joe Alt, without Blake Fisher, without Zeke Correll, and a new look offensive line.
So we're talking about the new guys now, or the guys that have been there, but now a new role for many of these guys. And so Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price they move to the forefront now. And this is, somewhat reminiscent of 2 years ago when you had, kind of a 2-horse backfield and a timeshare, as you put it earlier. And so how do you think, before we dive into each guy individually, how do you think that these two are going to, or 3 or 4, depending on what it looks like what is this going to look like as far as, who gets what, who's out there, however you want to take
that's it. The big question we got to find out, right? I mean, I think there's an expectation that it's going to be Jeremiah Love is kind of 1A and Jadarian Price is 1B. Oh, okay, that's kind of where I'm at. And you could flip them. Jadarian's 1A, Jeremiah's 1B. It doesn't matter. They both have a 1 there, right? Like, there's going to be some level of, timeshare, carry share there where, some games it's going to be Jadarian's going to be the hot hand and they're going to ride him. Sometimes Jeremiah's going to be the hot hand. They'll ride him. Sometimes they may go into a game saying, hey, like Jadarian's style and what we do with him fits more of how we want to attack this defense than what Jeremiah does. and vice versa. And so those are all things that are going to kind of factor into the weekly split, but you expect Notre Dame to go into every game saying, how can we get Jodarian Price involved in the run game with the occasional, stuff out of the backfield? And then how can we get Jeremiah Love involved in all facets? That's really what I think the game plan is going to be, is if you don't get both of these guys involved in the game plan, I think you're failing as a coach. It's a mistake, in my opinion, to have two guys this good not both be focal points of the offense. You don't just have one or two focal. I mean, there's hopefully the great teams have multiples focal points, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what the key is going to be, is how can we as a staff figure out ways to get these guys to where we can make sure we're taking advantage of both of their skills in each game. I think that's the first thing that you look at and say, okay, that's their number one goal right there, is to say they've got to figure out ways to get both of those guys involved in the game every week. Now, that may vary, as I said.
Sure.
Who's going to get more of the bulk from week to week? I'm okay with that taking some time, but they both need to be focal points of the offense.
Well, and especially this day and age, you rarely see. I think last year with Estimé kind of being the horse, that's more the exception than the rule these days. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, but here's the thing too, Vince, is like Audri only had 4 games with over 20 carries. And 2 of those games where he had over 20 carries were games where they were force feeding him the ball a little bit to get him over 1,000.
Yeah.
And then once Stanford came, it's just, he was just so dominant in that game that it was just like, dude, keep feeding him. Right. Yeah. But going into those last 2 games, I mean, his 2 highs for carries that year were 20 against Central Michigan and 22 against USC. And he had 16, 13, 14, 20, 14, 18, 10, 22, 19, 17, 22, 25. Like, his carry numbers in the last 5 games should have been what his carry numbers were all season. And, that they, who knows why they did or didn't do that, but the fact is they didn't. So
yeah,
I agree for the most part that carry the load by yourself thing is not really something you're going to see as much at a place like Notre Dame. It still exists in college football, but it doesn't exist as much as it used to. I mean, there were, you look at the kid at Troy had 297 carries last year. Taj Brooks at Texas Tech had 290 carries last year. Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State had 285. Cody Schrader at Missouri had 276. Quinshon Judkins at Ole Miss had 271. Now, part of the reason some of those guys had higher carry numbers is because they didn't do as much per carry as Audri did. Quinshon Judkins had 61 more carries than Audri did last year. 61 more. Yet Audri had almost 200 more yards than Quinshon Judkins, who is supposedly this phenomenal first-team All-American back. And I'm like, well, you guys weren't saying that Audri was first team last year, and he put up way better numbers than Quinshon did.
He got snubbed big time anyway, but
he was a second-teamer with some. But and I was, so the point is, his 210 carries were not that much. But part of the reason, too, is you don't need to have a guy carry the ball 250 times when you have the kind of backfield Notre Dame has. Right. That's my point is, Oklahoma State needed Ollie Gordon to carry the ball 285 times. They needed Texas Tech needed Taj Brooks to carry the ball 290 times. That was how they were going to win. Notre Dame didn't necessarily need to feed Audri Estimé 20-plus carries every single game.
Yeah.
There just wasn't the need for that. There were times they probably should have given the ball more, but a lot of other times, just he got his, let him, let's use those other guys. That's even more so true now in this era of you got to win 16 games to win a championship. I think teams even need to be more mindful of, let's make sure that we're not abusing the bodies of our young running backs. That's a major concern that I have.
Well, especially with 16 games.
Right. For 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, carrying the ball 350 times, which used to be a thing.
You sure?
And it's not as much of a thing anymore. Thank goodness. Now, part of it is the game. We've talked about this. The run game was significantly impacted, in my opinion, last year by the clock rules. And the example is look, in 2023, the most carries in a game or in a season were Kamani Vidal, who had 297 in 14 games. There were only 3 guys with over 280. In 2022, one season before, there were 4 guys with over 300 and 7 that had over 280. In 2021, You had the leading carrier had 341. You had 2 other guys that had more than anybody this season. So even in 2020, Breece Hall had 279 in 12 games. 2019, you had 5 guys with over 300. 2018, you had 3 guys with over 300. 2017, you had 3 guys with 300 or more. 2016, you had 5 guys with 200 or 300 or more. Another guy was a 298. So you're seeing less of that because of the clock rules. But the other part of it is I do think you're going to see that even more with top teams when you look at just the 12+1 numbers, because of the fact that teams are, if you're smart and you care about your players. I mean, if you're just like, look, he's our workhorse, and we're going to ride him. I don't care about if we wear him out for the NFL or not. Okay, fine. I mean, that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do. Teams that truly understand, we got to make sure we're taking care of our players and winning football games. Hey, if I want my guy fresh in game 16, need to make sure that maybe we're figuring some other things out throughout the course of the year.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame, it's easy because you've got this depth. But in my opinion, if you did decide Jeremiah Love was your number 1 and Jardine was your number 2, do you really want to go into a season giving Jeremiah Love 15 to 20 carries a game for the regular season? And then now you're going to ask him to do it for 4 more games in the postseason? It's a lot of touches for a sophomore that's barely over 200 pounds. So that's the other factor to me, Vince, is for Notre Dame specifically, they got to be really smart about how they distribute carries, especially early in the year, to make sure that they're keeping both of these kids fresh. And that's on. So that's even if you just assume one guy's way better than the others. The fact that they're both excellent is why for Notre Dame it's easy. It's not even about protecting your players. It's just about, we got these really good players. We got to find ways to use them all.
Yeah.
And so it'll be more natural for Notre Dame. They won't have to like. For some, you can say, well, man, so how do I justify not giving our by far best player more touches? So for future reference, I understand that. That's a tricky thing. But for Notre Dame, it's easy because it's like, well, because I got 2 guys I need to justify getting touches for. So it's easier to do that, in my opinion.
Sure. Brian, let's break these guys down a little bit. We'll start at the top, or the perceived top, and we still have to see kind of how it shakes out. But let's start with Jeremiah Love. He's rocking a new number this year. He's number 4, maybe a little bit more streamlined. I don't know. But, let's talk about him, what he brings to this offense, both obviously in the backfield, out of the backfield, in the slot, a lot of different ways that he can benefit and help this offense. No doubt about it.
Man, it's fun when you look at a kid like Jeremiah Love. It really is.
When you're an offensive coordinator, it's like, Swiss Army knife.
There's so much you can potentially do with him, that you're just like, man, it's like the only thing that limits his potential production in your offense is you and your creativity, right? Like you get guys like that sometimes. And it's like, well, how can we use them? However you want.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing is, and when you look at a guy like Jeremiah Love, well, first of all, so Vince, I got a little bit of a sneak peek at CFB 2025, by the way, even though we got to go buy our hard copy game tomorrow. I'll explain to you later why. But they made Jeremiah Love really fast in that game, really fast.
He is.
And he is. And he's one of those long strider type of kids. He's 6'1". He's, over 200 pounds now, but still not a big kid. He's fast. He runs with a lot. The thing that surprised me last year, Vince, like his speed didn't surprise me. His ability to catch the ball didn't surprise me. His ability to make plays after the catch or after the contact or after got the ball didn't surprise me.
Sure.
What surprised me was how hard he ran. Like that was something that he was 190 pounds when he showed up at Notre Dame last year, Vince. Like 190. That's what he weighed in at. I was told that by someone very close to him. And I mean, I know he put weight on when he got here, but he was $190. And remember, Jeremiah was not an early enrollee. So when I say got here, I don't mean January. I mean June. When he showed up in June, he was $190. And the first time you saw him carry the ball, you're like, okay, this kid runs hard. Like, imagine what it's going to be like when he gets a little bit of armor put on him over the next couple of years in the strength program. But the thing that I also saw last year, Vince, is he's a little bit more, he's starting to figure out being a running back a little bit more. Because remember, early in his career, like as a junior, my big thing with him was great athlete, not a natural running back yet. Then as a senior, he kind of started to show that more and more and more. And what I love about him too, Vince, is the best game of his career in high school, his very best game was his last. It was a state title game in which he rushed for over 300 yards, like best game of his career, and had some big catches in that game too. So Jeremiah is just now kind of coming into his peak running back form now, or other guys are that as sophomores in high school because they've just been playing running back their whole life. Jeremiah, if you went back and interviewed him as a freshman or sophomore in high school, Vince, he would have told you, I'm going to be a cornerback or I'm going to be a wide receiver or something like that. It's like running back became a thing for him.
Yeah.
And so he's starting to kind of figure that out, which gets you kind of excited because those little things are starting to come around to him. And that's what Dylan McCullough's focus on is with him, is doing the little things right. This is why it's important to stay on this track on an outside zone or an inside zone, and why it's important that, your footwork. That's just something that I struggle with, but this is something young running backs struggle with when I was coaching running backs for a year, is they just want to get the ball and go. And you're like, well, okay, but I need you to use this footwork. Well, you're just trying to control me. No, I'm trying to get you timed correctly.
Control me.
Right? Like I'm being hyperbolic.
I get it.
This is a coach in Muhlenberg. Those kids were way smarter than that. Like they were more intellectual, but like that's the point was like, well, you're just trying to get me to do it just because that's what you want me to do. And then you had to explain, it's like, no, I need you to do this because this is how it times up correctly. If you take too many steps, then the hole closes up. If you don't take enough steps, the hole never opens up in time.
It's timing.
And so 100%. It's those little things. Hey, this is why you stay on that outside zone. Well, yeah, okay, I'm inside track of the tight end on outside zone. And so I run right for that aiming point, even though the line's moving. I'm still now your aiming point's really the inside butt of the guard. You stay on that track. So as he goes, you go. That those little things that maybe high school running backs don't understand because they're just get the ball and go.
Mm-hmm.
He's learning those type of things and starts getting exciting. But there's so much you can do with him as a runner. You inside zone, outside zone. I was very frustrated that last year they did with him what we saw Notre Dame do in 2022 with Chris Tyree, which is you put the backup running back in the game and just run downhill with him. And why didn't he run some tosses? Why didn't he run some stuff to get him outside? Why didn't he run some stretch? I mean, who knows why that is, but he didn't. But so now it's evolved your game a little bit, but he's theoretically the skill set. He can do so many different things. He can be a home run hitter. He can run with enough power to be successful. He can be a very good out of the backfield type of guy. Somebody in the chat said, and I'm not sure who said it, but it was a great point. Like, I hope Mike Denbrock uses Jeremiah Love the way that Tommy Reese used Logan Diggs in 2022 against North Carolina. Remember, he was catching slides out of the backfield. They ran that little counter throwback wheel up the sideline for a long touchdown. They had a delay seam, I think, to Audri in that game as well. Like early in that season, they were really using the running backs out of the backfield a lot. Yeah, I want to see some of that. But what really separates Jeremiah, Vince, is you can do all that with him, but you can also line him up in the slot and do receiver stuff with him. Not as a full-time guy. You're not going to teach him all the intricacies of being a receiver, but you can run him on slants and crossers and seams and slot fades and different things like that don't require him to be a seasoned, grizzled receiver veteran to do, and it just presents some very special matchup opportunities with him.
I want to make a comparison here, and I know you're not a huge NFL guy, but you do watch the playoffs, and so I want to bring this up. I'm watching the receiver documentary on Netflix, which I like those behind-the-scenes kind of deals. But anyway, one of the guys they're following, and I realize the primary position is different, but one of the guys they're following is Deebo Samuel from the 49ers. And every single game, he gets carries, he gets catches. They basically move him around. They put him all over the field, matchup nightmare, and he's an integral part of their offensive game plan. And like when he went down for like 3 games, they were 0-3 because he was such an important piece of what they do, moving him around and doing some different things. Would you like to see Jeremiah be that kind of a guy? Not so much that if he gets hurt, they're 0-3, like that kind of a thing. But at the same time, you line him up in the backfield, you put him out, you spread him out, you just do end around, you do all these different things with him to try to get him the football in matchups that are beneficial to the offense.
In an inverse type of way, yes.
Right.
So with Deebo, he's a receiver that they'll do some running back stuff with.
Right.
Jeremiah is a running back that I want to see them do some receiver stuff with. So yes, in an inverse type of way, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's the whole premise of Debo? We got to figure out ways to get him the football.
Bingo.
Right? Like,
yes.
and just in different ways that and there's two reasons why. One is just the theoretical, like he's your most dynamic player or one of your two most dynamic players along with Christian McCaffrey, because that's the unique thing about them is you've got two guys that can do a lot of different things. And I actually think Christian McCaffrey might even be the better comparison, because Christian can line up outside and do some things as a receiver, as a more natural running back that can then go do some things in the pass game. Although I don't know that the Niners used him a lot like that last year.
Right.
Understandably, because he has a lot of tread on his tires, but early in his career and at Stanford, they would do some things like that. So I think that might be a good example. But the Debo thing is like, look, we've got to get this guy to football.
Right.
And we've got to and sometimes as a receiver, if the defense is going to put all their attention on you, they can keep you from touching the ball a lot. Well, the way that they use Debo, it's impossible to limit his touches to less than 5, unless the offensive staff just decides we don't really care about that this game, which sometimes, look, we're playing a team that sucks and we don't want to, beat them up and all that kind of stuff. Fine. But to me, when you look at that inside, outside, run game, screen game, pass game, literally you can use Debo in every fashion. And the last time we saw a Notre Dame player like that, and this is probably unfair for me to say, but the last time we saw a guy like that was Rocket Ismail back in 1990. Because, the way that Notre Dame, and again, it's a bit of a reverse type of situation, but I'm going to pull up Rocket's numbers and Vince and kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about. So
that's
in 1990, you look at Rocket Ismail, he was Notre Dame's best receiver. Obviously, he had 32 catches for 699 yards and was a dynamic impact receiver. And I believe he led the team in catches. And just to put into context, because of the style of offense that Notre Dame played in, Rocket led the team with 32 catches. The next highest was 15. Rocket led the team with 699 receiving yards. The next closest was 229. And his 2 receiving touchdowns tied for the team lead, because Notre Dame only threw 8 touchdown passes that year, right? Because, again, it's a triple option offense. So just put some context to those numbers. But then what they would do is you'd watch them play, and then like fourth quarters of games, they had Rodney Culver and Ricky Waters and Tony Brooks and Jerome Bettis and Dorsey Levens in the backfield on that team, right? But in the second half, third and fourth quarters of games, after they've worn on you with Rodney Culver and Ricky Waters, they'd put Rocket at running back and hand him the ball off. And so that year, Rocket Ismail, despite being the team's leading receiver by a mile, finished third on the offense in rushing yards. He only had 42 fewer yards than Ricky Waters did as the number 2 leading rusher. Rodney Culver led the team with 710 yards. He was more of a fullback. And then you had Ricky Waters had 579 yards. And Rocket Ismail averaged rushed for 537 yards and had 8 yards a carry, because they were going to run screens to him. They would run that tunnel screen to him. He'd run deep. He'd line up. And you think when they put him in the back, they just probably ran toss with him, right? Yeah, they do that, but they'd also run him right downhill because of a worn out defense. He's through that hole so freaking fast,
right,
that you don't know what to do. And so, that's actually kind of the type of impact you hope to see from Jeremiah Love. Is you never know where he's going to be. One snap he's at tailback, the next snap he's in an offset, in a shotgun. The next snap he's in a pistol. The next snap, he's in a slot running vertically. The next snap, he's in a slot going into some sort of jet or orbit motion. The next snap, he's catching a screen out of the backfield. The next snap, he's catching a screen as a wide receiver stacked behind Eli Raridan. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many different things. You don't know where he's going to be. Oh, and by the way, crap, as a defense, they just came out 21 personnel. So we're having to deal with Jeremiah Love outside, running RPOs and running screens. And we also have to figure out a way to defend a read zone with Riley Leonard and Jadarian Price. I mean, like, that's the thing with a guy like Jeremiah, if he's as good as we hope he could be. Because here's the thing about everything we just said, Vince, it's all projection.
Right.
Because all we really saw him do last year was run downhill.
Right.
Again,
it's true.
I've been a big defender of Jared Parker in a lot of ways, and I will, because I think he was better than some people give him credit for. But that's one of the things that really bothered me last year. Is, to me, it was sort of inexcusable that you went through an entire season with Jeremiah Love and he only caught 8 passes all year. That's it. And to me, that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
it was a major missed opportunity, and most of those were checkdowns.
It was frustrating to watch, to be honest with you. I mean, we all knew the talent that we think Jeremiah Love has, and it was just like, really? You're just going to pound him between the tackles? Like, that's the play.
Yeah. I mean, just go look at the first touchdown run against Tennessee State, and you're like, yeah, okay. I mean, they got him outside. It was an outside zone play, and it's like the rest of the year, it's like we didn't see that.
Yeah. It's like it didn't happen.
You know, it's like, well, okay, well, it must not have counted because it was against an FCS team. All right, I get that. But, like, it looked pretty good.
Right, exactly.
But the talent's there. You see it in practice. You did see it in stretches of games last year. But it's got to be used well. Then the question is, Vince, how much do you put on him early? That's the other question. Is, do you just come out game one and this is what we're doing?
Yeah.
Or do you build him to that? Because, again, this is a guy that's never been the guy. He's a true sophomore. You know, last season as a player, he only had 79 touches all season on offense. So now you're just going to throw him to say, hey, let's go ahead and give him 20 touches against A&M? Like, that's what I don't know. My thing is, I would sort of say, hey, we're gonna use him right away, from the standpoint of we're going to have him do everything, but maybe the volume of what he does early is not as great.
Okay.
But we will use him in this way, that way. If like looking at it from the coach's standpoint, when we will use him in the pass game, screen game, and run game, but whereas in a month against Louisville, we may have him touch it 20 times. Against A&M, he may only touch it 12 to 13. So that's where we're at.
I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. I think that's a good idea. I'm
not saying it's an idea. I'm saying I wonder.
Yeah.
Like, how they're going to handle that.
Because, you know, Texas A&M, you don't want to take anything for granted, and you don't want to necessarily hold anything back, because if you don't win this game, then that's a problem. You know, that's a problem.
I'm not saying holding anything back. I'm simply saying, like, do you it's kind of like what you said about Deebo Samuel, right? Like, they put the entire game plan around this, and then when he's not there, it doesn't work. What I'm saying is, we don't know that Jeremiah Love can be the focal point of an offense for 20 touches. And you build your game plan around that, and maybe he's not ready yet. And now what do you do? And do you really want to give him that kind of workload in game one, knowing I got 15 more of these bad boys hopefully coming up? But let me guess, your thing is, but you got to win that first one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's what I'm not saying you weren't saying that. It's just, you do whatever you've got to do. You get, like, you know, because we talked about Riley Leonard, right? And you know, he needs to be a part of the run game against Texas A&M. And maybe that's not so much the next 3 games, but in that game one, he needs to be part of the run game. Like, that's got to be part of your offense because of what you're going up against in that A&M defense and having to win that game. Same scenario for me with Jeremiah Love. It's like, okay, however you see him in your offense, that's what we need to see in game one, you know, and there might be some more nuances and things as the season progresses and all of that. And maybe he gets more comfortable with certain things, or you get more comfortable with certain things as a coach. I get all of that. But if he's going to be an integral part of your offense, then he needs to be an integral part of your offense in game one. That I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm not saying that's not accurate. What I'm saying is he can be an integral part of your offense with 10 touches.
For sure.
Instead of 20.
Because he can get them in different ways.
That's my point. And it's more about creating explosives, or, you know, 15, because, you know, we saw him in a game once where he was the guy and he carried the ball 15 times against Oregon State, and he only had 39 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Right. My point is, I don't think you need to be, okay, if we go as far as Jeremiah goes, I don't think you need to put that burden on him in game one, because you have Jadarian Price, and we'll get to him in a second. You have Riley Leonard. You have Keidron Young. You have Aeneas Williams. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
And what if because, like, with a running back like that, Vince, once he gets worn out, it's like, it's harder to recover those guys. But the whole thing ties into the fact that you also have Jadarian Price. And we spent a lot of time talking about Jeremiah Love. But if Jeremiah Love was not at Notre Dame or was injured, I'd be talking about Jadarian Price is going to be a 1,000-yard running back this year. And we've been asked this 15 times on Buy Sell Holds. Hey, look, you've got this situation where, could Jeremiah be your leader in total offense, but Jadarian's your leader in rushing yards? Yeah, I think that's absolutely possible because this is going to be a 1A, 1B. And we've spent a lot of oxygen on Jeremiah, understandably so.
Sure.
And we're doing what I think is a big issue amongst Notre Dame fans, which is we're just dismissing or relegating Jadarian Price to number 2 status as opposed to 1A, 1B. Because again,
right,
Jeremiah had 39 yards rushing on 15 carries in a bowl game. Jadarian had 100. He went over 100 in that game. Now, he had a big carry at the end of the game that put him over 100, but he was already ahead of where Jeremiah was and had some very nice runs in the first half. It's use them both.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe later in the year it starts to, kind of go one way or the other, but use them both. And to me, to beat Texas A&M, you need both of them. You need both of them to play at a high level. And that's my thing is I want to have this situation be where Jeremiah is moving all over. But the reality is, Vince, it's hard to move Jeremiah all over if that other guy doesn't do damage as well.
Right.
So, I don't know if they're going to use 21 personnel. I have no clue. I've literally not talked to anybody at Notre Dame about it. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. I talked to someone they're going to use 21 personnel.
Right.
But what I'm telling you is I have not talked to anyone about if they're going to use 21 personnel. I'm simply saying I think they should really implement 21 personnel because of the unique nature of this 1-2 punch. Not only are they both outstanding, I mean, look, I graded them both as top 100 players coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this before. Jadarian Price, I was told by a Notre Dame coach on offense before he got hurt, I was told this going into the summer, he may be our starting running back this year.
Mm-hmm.
This is going into the 2022 season where Audri Estimé almost went for 1,000 and Logan Diggs went for over 800. And if either one of those guys was the only back, they both would have gone for over 1,000 if they weren't splitting carries. And Chris Tyree had over 400 yards rushing that year. So you had 2 guys on your backfield that would have been 1,000-yard rushers if you didn't have to split carries between them. Not have to. If you didn't choose to split carries between the 2 of them. When you should have split carries between the 2 of them.
Right.
Jadarian was outperforming them in the spring as a true freshman.
Crazy.
He's got a year under his belt of getting healthy, getting his juice back. We saw last season, late in the year. You guys saw the juice was back by the end of the year. I mean, he had a little 6-yard cut early in the game against Oregon State, Vince. I was watching this again yesterday. And it was an inside zone, and there was 2 great things about it. Number one is Billy Schrouth took the D tackle and just drove him to the backside of the play. And Jadarian made this great cut right behind him, but he was actually stretching a little bit this way and then, boom, planted behind Billy Schrouth. And it's like that's the kind of run that fans don't see and appreciate.
Right.
Because that type of quickness and explosiveness to get 6 yards on that play is what makes you an elite back. Or the potential to be an elite back. And then, of course, when they did make a mistake, and there was he had another carry on I think it was a duo call, Vince, where he completely bounced it outside, stiff arms one guy, and then just outruns the rest of the defense for a 10-plus yard game in the second quarter of the game before his 50-yarder. And then, of course, you make one mistake with Jadarian. And this is the thing I love about the 2 of them. These are guys that will crush you if you make a mistake.
Right, exactly.
These are the type of guys that if you have a bad run fit, if you don't read the quarterback properly, they will destroy you. And honestly, Notre Dame hasn't really had a guy like that since 2017. That's how Josh Adams was. And both of these guys are more better natural running backs than Josh was. They're both shiftier. They both have better vision. I would argue that they're both probably 40 times faster than Josh. Maybe they're at least as fast as Josh. And Josh was a home run hitter. But I think of that 80-yard touchdown run that Josh had against USC, Vince. They're running read zone, and the backside linebacker and the backside safety froze on Brandon Wimbush for just a second. Step to Brandon Wimbush. That's all Josh Adams needed.
Yeah.
Boom, 80-yard touchdown. That's the kind of impact they both bring to the table. And that's what kind of gets you excited about what this duo can be, because when you look at that 2017 backfield, Vince, and you think about what they were able to do, I mean, you had Josh Adams rushes for over 1,400 yards. He goes for 6.9 yards per carry. Dexter Williams comes off the bench. He has 9.2 yards per carry. That season. Now, he didn't carry it as much as I expect the number 2 guy to carry because they had Brandon Wimbush carrying the ball. And then also, Dex was banged up a little bit that year and only played 10 games. But the point is, you had no matter who you brought off the bench in that scenario, you had a home run hitter. And then when you had to deal with the quarterback that could run the way Brandon Wimbush did, that forced teams into mistakes. Who do you want? Who do you want to like? It's kind of like my cousins or family would tell me about, when they were a kid, they'd go, I think it might've been my dad actually told me this. I think it was my dad. I could be getting it wrong. Maybe it's one of his brothers. The stories those guys tell when they get together. My dad's one of 11. So like they got some stories, but I think it was their grandma that she would basically go make them get a switch off the tree, and that's what you get the whooping with is whatever switch you brought in. So it's like, which switch do I want to get my butt beat with today?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the thing that defenses are like, okay, who do we want to not game plan around? Is it Jeremiah Love? Is it Jadarian Price? Is it Riley Leonard? Is it Mitchell Evans? Is it Chris Mitchell? Is it Jaden Greathouse? Is it Bo Collins? Like who do we Jordan Faison? Who do we want to not be the focal point of our game plan this week?
Because you can't pick them all.
Right. Because last year it was Audric and Mitchell.
That's it.
That was it. I mean, you had to do some things with Chris Tyree to protect against the speed, but he wasn't someone you were necessarily completely game planning for the way that he should have been, but the way Notre Dame used him, he wasn't. And so those are things you've got to look at and say that could make it really difficult for this is because you do have that dynamic group. And you've got a guy like Jadarian who's strong. Yeah. He's built like a truck. He's not the biggest guy, but he's built like a truck. I mean, you see him, he's just really cut up and chiseled, and he's got great vision as a runner. That's something that people don't understand. His vision as a runner is excellent. And he's a home run hitter. And we saw that last year as a kick returner, Vince. But here's something else that if I were to say this to you, most Notre Dame fans probably would not guess. Who averaged more yards per carry last year? Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price? Most people like, oh, Jeremiah Love. Nope, Jadarian Price. By 0.4. Jadarian was a 5.8. Jeremiah was a 5.4. And so you look at those two guys, you're like, boy, they're both home run hitters. And then you look at what Jeremiah did or Jadarian did against USC as a kick returner. So they're both guys that can really turn mistakes into major punishment. And that we haven't even got into Riley Leonard. And then you wrap up the final events, then you have the young guys. Right. And coming into the season, it was they might play. Now I think they're going to play because of the injury to Jabron Payne.
Yeah.
And now one of them is going to be your number 3. And the other one, I think you find ways to use. And honestly, Vince, at the end of the day, I don't think either Keidron Younger and Neas Williams are 5-year players. I don't think either of them are 5-year players. So play them. Get them touches. And so, but who? Is it do they play in roles?
Is he going to be a primary third guy?
Yes, exactly. Right. Or is it, Aeneas is kind of the third down guy. Keidron's your short yardage goal line guy. Who steps into the number 2 role if one of the top 2 guys goes down? That part's going to get figured out in camp.
Yeah, agreed. And it's going to be – it's a great opportunity for these 2 young guys, though, right? I mean –
big time.
Because, they're competitors. They want to play. And before, it was kind of a little bit of a mountain to climb because of the guys that were in front of them, the guys that have already been here and the guys that have gotten carries in a Notre Dame uniform, right? And because of that injury, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel where I could be an important piece to what this offense is doing. Now, understanding they're not going to be 1 or 2 or 1A, 1B or whatever. That's those guys. And that I think that's to be understood. But there's an opening here.
Yeah. Let me say one caveat to that, though, Vince. But you're one twisted ankle away from being that guy.
That's fair.
Because now that you are in that number 3 role. And to me, that's the thing is like these kids are going to have to grow up in a hurry and maybe be ready for a little bit more of a prominent role because of the opportunities that are there that came from the injury to Jabron Payne.
Sure.
And so that's going to be because like honestly, the biggest question mark I have for the running back room this year, Vince, is not are they going to be explosive? They will be. Are they going to be productive? They will be. Will they hurt you in the run game and the pass game? They will. I mean, I'm literally just assuming that. And because why? Running back's a position where I don't care about experience. I've said this a million times. I'm being consistent here. I don't care.
Yep.
Experience doesn't matter. Running back, you either have it or you don't. Yep. And that's just, the reality. So those things I know are going to happen, but will they do the little things well?
Right.
You know, will Jeremiah and Jadarian understand, hey, it's 3rd and 1. I don't need you to go for 70. I need you to get 1. Right? That, you know what I mean? Like now if you get that 1 and you're still going, go. But don't kind of dance around in the backfield trying to do something on 3rd and 1. Get the 1. Right? And that's something that Audric learned better last year, where Audric sometimes would try to find that space. Josh Adams was really bad about that. Now you understood it because sometimes he would turn that 1 into 70, right? So you're like, okay, kind of live with it a little bit.
True.
But you want to see that, you know, is the pass pro going to be better? That pass pro was not good last year. It was not bad, but it wasn't good.
Right.
And even Audric needed to get better at it. And so, but now you're a lot younger. How much is Jeremiah Love going to be that guy on 3rd down?
Sure.
That you're going to have back there as in pass pro protecting the quarterback? Is it Jadarian? Is it Kedron? Is it Aeneas? Is it Devin Ford? Now, the easy answer would be Devin Ford. He's tough. He knows what he's doing, but he's not a very big guy.
Sure.
And he's not going to scare anybody. so that, you know, that's a reality. But the reality, all 5 of these kids can catch the football. That's the one good thing you have going for you. So there's nobody that you put in there on 3rd down and say, well, this guy can't help us in the pass game. He's just a pass blocker.
Right.
Like that's not the reality. But who becomes that guy? Because Dylan McCall always talks about, he's like, what is events like 8 starting positions?
Got
basically?
8 spots. Yep, 8 spots.
And so who gets those? Who gets that? Okay, we're now in 10 personnel or 11 personnel in an obvious passing situation. Who's that running back?
Right.
Now, it's one thing to win the job, but and who thrives in that role? And you need more than one, you know, because otherwise you're kind of giving away who you are and what you're doing. Those are the things, honestly, Vince, that I'm more concerned about than, okay, who, you know, are they going to run well? Are they going to, you know, I'm honestly not as worried about that type of thing. I know that they're going to be productive. The question is going to come down to, will they be able to do the little things effectively? That's my biggest question is, will they do, you know, and that could be the difference, Vince, between, you know, is this a team that goes, you know, 12-0, 10-2, 11-1?
Sure.
It's little things. And it's not just the little things at running back, but they are the group we're talking about now. And,
yeah, of course.
And, you know, that's the thing that we're focused on now is, can they be that group of players? Because they're going to be highlight reel guys, Vince. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
They're going to be highlight reel guys, but can they do the little things that can be the difference between, yeah, I rushed for $115, but I didn't make that one block at the end of the game and we lost to a semifinal game.
Yeah.
Or we lost at A&M. You know, and fans will look at the production. Oh, he had a great game. Yeah, but he missed 3 cuts that could have returned, you know, could have continued drives. He had that missed block at the end of the game that cost them. You know, it's you got to make sure you're able to do the little things, and that's what we're going to find out about these kids is, can they do the little things?
Right.
And the faster they grow up in that area, the better this football team is going to be, and the more exciting this football team is going to be, and more importantly, Vince, the more dangerous this football team is going to be. Because if these running backs are as good as you and I think they're going to be, that's probably as big of a reason why I have the optimism that I have for this offense, is because I just have a feeling that this group of backs is going to be, I mean, I know it's a bit hyperbolic, but I really believe this group of backs has a chance to be as good as any in the country. They've got to prove it. And if you're asking me to do a ranking right now, guess what? I'm putting Ohio State's ahead of them. I'm putting Penn State's ahead of them because of the proven production, and they're also talented. But if you're going to ask me, do they have a chance to be the best coming out of the season? They got a shot. They got a long way to go, but they got a shot. And I don't feel like I'm being hyperbolic or anything. And when I say that, that's the talent that I think this group has. And now we just got to see if they can put it together. That's going to be the key.
This team can't just be Riley Leonard and the receivers.
Right.
And the pass catchers. You've got to be more dimensional than that, right? And it can't just be Riley Leonard and his legs. It's got to be the running backs. And I feel like the running backs have an opportunity to, early on in the season, make some plays where maybe there aren't plays to be made as the offensive line is gelling and kind of getting together. And then as the season progresses and that line starts to get better and better and better and gets to that ceiling where we think they can be in 2024, that's just going to absolutely unleash the talent that is in the running back room. So I think you're going to see the maturation process of these running backs. You're going to see them make plays just based on talent alone early on. I do think that. And then you're going to start seeing them gel within the offense, and the plays that will be made organically within the offense are going to be spectacular to watch. I mean, the best part about this offense is they're good at all the levels, right? There's not one group that you're like, well, I hope, that
they're
the wide
talented
receivers,
at all
right.
levels.
There you go.
Let me just put that one qualifier, because they got to prove that they're good at all the levels.
Fair. That's fair.
But they're at least talented. That's what I'm comfortable saying.
There's no group where you're like, man, I hope the wide receivers are good enough that they kind of overshadow, the weakness here or the weakness there, whatever. I'm just picking a group. Right. But each of these groups has the talent to hold their own. And each of these groups has the talent to keep defensive coordinators up at night. So that's going to be another fun part about this season.
I would argue, while very true, and I completely agree, I think this group of running backs, you talk about what are expectations. I mean, we can get into numbers. I'm not too worried about numbers. This is what I care about as a coach. Numbers are fine, but there's a lot of hollow numbers out there. This is what I always tell people, like, you can't just – if all you have to do to make a case is stats, you don't really have anything, because there's a lot of hollow numbers out there, a lot of hollow numbers out there. And it's about how do you impact your opponent. And I think this group, if they are as good as I think they're going to be, is going to be the group that most defensive coordinators stay up at nights worrying the most about. Maybe not Texas A&M, because they don't know it yet. But by the time you get to Purdue, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Florida State, USC, this is the group that of the skill players. So running back, receiver, O-line, tight end, skill players, then obviously O-line and tight end. Maybe you could say the quarterback is a little different. I'm talking more guys that have to get the ball given to them, not the guy that has the ball every down.
Yeah.
I think this group is going to present more of a headache for teams than the receivers. And when you consider how high I am on this receiving core, Vince, that should tell you something.
Right.
Because I just look at it from the standpoint of, if I'm a defensive coordinator, running backs that can do the things that this group can do potentially makes it incredibly hard to game plan for, because of how much, like, a great receiver can impact the run game to a degree, but a great running back that can do everything impacts, just so much. And that's something I'm looking forward to seeing. But at the end of the day, what we don't know, how are they going to be used?
Right.
And that's the biggest question mark that we're going to have, Vince. And honestly, we're not going to have that told to us in fall camp, because we're not going to see much of fall camp. So it's going to be something that we're going to find out when the rest of the fan base finds out that way.
Yeah, we're all kind of in the same boat in that regard, that's for sure. So we're all going to be tuned in or watching from our seat on August 31st, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
So that's going to do it for this part of the show, the running back preview. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Really appreciate it. Jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com, because, if you're not there, you're a square. So jump on. Part 2 of today's show, buy, sell, hold. We got a lot of good ones here. And once again, just a reminder of the rules, or kind of how we do it.
It's rules.
Yeah.
Guidelines.
Rules. Yeah. Guidelines. I like that better. That sounds better. So the guidelines are, if you're a member of the premium message board, you head over to the boards and you put in your buy, sell, hold question, and then we turn them into cards and we talk about them on the show. We don't take them in the chat unless they are attached to a super chat, which I believe we do have one.
We do have one.
We're going to lead off with.
We'll start off
with
that.
If you forgot to put it in and you want to throw a super chat in with your buy, sell, hold, we'll go ahead and do that. But you got to be a member of the premium message board in order to get your question answered. So we got a bunch here lined up. I'm excited to get rocking and rolling here, Brian. So let's fire it up.
We'll start off with this. Since this is a super chat from a board member,
nice.
We'll start off with this one.
Excellent. So Andrew Gilmore, thank you so much for the super chat. In honor of Bronny James, when I read this the first time, I was like, oh no, where is this going? But it goes to a good place. Buy, sell, hold. Brian Ferentz, as Iowa's offensive coordinator, was the worst case of nepotism in college football history.
Nope.
No?
Sell.
You're selling this?
Yeah, I'm selling this. You ever heard of Derek Dooley?
No.
Derek Dooley was the son of longtime Georgia head coach Vince Dooley. This cat got the head coaching job at Louisiana Tech. And in 3 years, he went 5-7, 8-5, and 4-8. He went 4-8 in his last year at Louisiana Tech. The next year, he was hired as the head coach at Tennessee. He had a losing record at Louisiana Tech. Was coming off a 4-8 season, and he got the head coaching job at Tennessee.
Fair.
That is the worst job of the worst case of nepotism I've ever seen, where a guy only got the job because of who his daddy was. Now, he's been a decent assistant coach. He had no business being a coordinator or head coach. None. Brian Ferentz was an OC on his dad's team, but here's the difference between Brian Ferentz and Derek Dooley. Brian Ferentz was part of winning teams. Everybody hammers Brian Ferentz how bad he was, and he was.
He was.
But Iowa played in the Big Ten title game the last 2 years.
That's also true.
Or at least the 2 of the last 3 years.
Also true.
Right? I mean, so, yeah, he was bad, and he held them back, but he never got promoted to head coach because of who his dad was. Derek Dooley got promoted to head coach because of who his dad was. And, again, Vince, could you imagine in this day and age with Twitter, think about how pissed Tennessee fans when they hired Greg Schiano, who's actually a good football coach. Guy won 10-plus games at freaking Rutgers.
Yeah. And he's got him going this way now again. Yeah.
Tennessee fans revolted when he was going to be the hire. I still don't understand why. But Derek Dooley got hired after going 4-8 at Louisiana Tech. Think about that. That's the worst case of nepotism I've ever seen.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, I mean, because, again, guy got 2 cracks at being a head football coach because of who his daddy was. And that's the only reason why he got those jobs, because whose dad was. It was not at all because of his track record as a football coach, in my opinion. I just don't see it. And again, he was hired at LSU, coach under Nick Saban at LSU. Why did he get that job?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
and nepotism is absolutely a thing. There's no doubt about it. But there's also, look, the coaching world is like any other profession, man. It's about who you know, not what you know. A lot of times, it just is. Whether it gets your foot in the door, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, you got to know somebody sometimes to get started or to get a job or whatever. It's all Vince, about who you know.
I had guys get jobs over me, and I'm like, I worked at camp with this guy. This is one of the biggest idiots I've ever met in my life.
Exactly. 100%.
But he played for so-and-so at such and such, or, played at this school or that school. And so you just look at it and you're like, wow, that's whatever. It is what it is. I'm someone who's not opposed to nepotism in theory. Like, to me, it's like, if I'm a coach and my son has proven himself as a successful guy, I'm okay with people willing to give him a benefit of the doubt because of where it came from. We do this all the time with recruits. Well, I'm willing to give this kid a benefit of the doubt because he's got, NFL DNA in him, right? And you think, Bryce Young, we're all excited about, even though he was super raw kid as a sophomore, junior, a lot of us were excited about him. Why? Who his dad was. That's not the same type of nepotism, because that's more about genes and DNA and projection that way. But like, to me, it's like, look, this guy grew up in this guy's house. He learned, he worked at it. Like, he's got the talent. We want to give him a shot over this guy that's maybe has a better degree, but we don't know, what that guy can do. This guy's been at it. So I'm not necessarily opposed to nepotism from just as a rule. I just think you have to be real careful with it. That's the thing. And the hardest thing is if nepotism exists where you're hiring, and this is the difference in the Brian Ferentz thing. Derek Dooley got jobs he shouldn't have got because of whose dad was, but it was never work. He only worked for his dad for 1 year, and that was as a GA, right? So it's a different type of nepotism than what Brian Ferentz got, because when you hire a guy that you hire your son, it's a lot harder to fire him if he can't do the job. And that was the biggest mistake that Kirk Ferentz had during his tenure at Iowa. Was he should have, if Brian Ferentz was his OC and his name was Brian Driscoll, and let's say I was his OC and I put up the numbers that his son put up the first few years, I'm out of a job.
Gone.
I'm out of a job. And and it's not that even, and here's the thing, it's not that he would even maybe consciously know that. Vince, you know how it is, man. You have kids. Can you say that you no doubt about it, are 100% objective about your children?
Nope.
Maybe sometimes, maybe not
Sometimes,
others,
and sometimes
right?
I'm too hard. But yeah,
Right.
I get exactly what you're saying. Rare is it that you're right down the middle where you should be.
Or just as honest and objective.
Right.
Some people can, but you can't
It's
guarantee
difficult.
it.
It is very difficult, and it depends on the situation. I will say that. Now, a case of nepotism, and I don't even know if I want to even use that word, but a case of where a kid grew up around the game and all of that. It's Charlie Weiss Jr. He was breaking down film as like a 14 and 15-year-old for the high school that he went to. Now, he was able to do that because he was using his dad's software and he was doing, different things like that. But I have coaching friends who coached at his high school, and they're like, he was amazing at breaking down film. Like, he has a football mind, and it's because he was hanging out with his dad all the time.
Charlie Weiss is only where he is because he's Charlie Weiss's son, meaning he got promoted up the ladder a little faster than
100%.
I would have.
Yes.
But that
he was a student coach when
but
he was
I
in
don't
college.
have a problem with it.
Exactly.
Because he's proven himself to be that good.
Exactly.
So he doesn't necessarily have to. And I'm not opposed to that. Like, I'm not like, I'm put him at the back of the line. No, I didn't work my butt off to achieve my level of success. And so you can punish my child and hold him to a higher standard than you do for everybody else. Right. Like, no, that's not right. I've earned the right to, open up these doors for my child. Exactly. And now it's up to my child to prove himself. So did Charlie Weiss Jr. get his foot in the door in ways that a guy like me, whose dad, drove a truck and didn't, coach at Notre Dame and for the Patriots? Yeah, he did.
Sure.
But once once his foot got in that door, he showed, I belong here.
Exactly.
I'm okay with that. I don't have jealousy towards that.
Right.
My jealousy goes more towards when I would see people get jobs like that, and you're like, that guy doesn't deserve it because he doesn't have the chops to do that job. That's when I would get pissed. But if it come down to it, I'm up for a job, or Charlie Weiss Jr. is up for a job, and I know I'm as smart as he is, he gets the job. I understand that. I mean, I'm never happy if I don't get a job, but I would understand that because I'm like, I talked to that guy. We were both there to interview the same day, and we spent about 30 minutes at lunch talking ball. That dude's wicked smart. I respect that.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just not. I'm not a huge fan of just dismissing nepotism as this evil thing that has no rightful place. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's a case by. I have no problem with it at all. In theory, it just has to be something that's also partly earned. Yeah, he got that job because of who he is, but he also has the chops to be successful there. That's the thing. And Brian Ferentz clearly did not. Right, Charlie Weiss Jr. so far seems to have shown himself. Now, he's never been like at Ole Miss. He's not the driver of the offense. Lane Kiffin still is.
Sure,
but Lane Kiffin allows Charlie Weiss Jr. to do a lot.
I was going to say he's an important part of the
standpoint.
He's an important part of the machine because he was with him at Florida International. Now he's with him at Ole Miss. So there's a reason he kept Florida Atlantic. Excuse me. There's a reason that he brought him along. I mean, he didn't have to do that. Let's just put it that way.
Yep. Good stuff. That was a good way to start it. Now let's go to our provided by the board, by our board members, buy, sell, hold.
All right. Jace Whitney has a buy, sell, hold. Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love, and Jadarian Price have a season similar to Marcus Mariota, DeAnthony Thomas, and Kenjon Barner's season at Oregon in 2012.
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. If you're going to ask me impact-wise, I could buy that. If you're going to ask me, by the way, Vince, that's two running backs. Kenjon was more of a pure running back. Both were small. DeAnthony was a running back, but also did a lot of slot stuff. So I get that comparison. If you're going to ask me impact on the game-wise, sure, I could see that. If you're going to ask me if they're going to do what those guys did statistically, I don't know if I can see that. I mean, they played in a pretty bad Pac-12. They averaged 49.6 points per game. I mean, that they put up some big time numbers.
It was a track meet. I remember those teams. I mean, it was a track meet.
As a trio, they rushed for over 3,000 yards that year. As a trio,
that's a lot.
Kenjon ran for 1,767. Marcus ran for 752. DeAnthony Thomas had 701. and they combined for 37 touchdowns. I don't see that. And DeAnthony had 45 catches for 445 yards. I don't see that. I don't see that same level of production from them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that would be tough. I mean, look, if the three of them combine for 3,000 yards on the ground,
just rushing,
just rush. That's what I'm saying. On the ground,
2,600 passing for Mariota, and the two backs combined for about 700 receiving yards.
Yeah, you might as well just book Notre Dame in the national championship game if that's the case. If those are the kind of yards they're putting up.
Agree.
Agree. That would be amazing.
Agree. Yeah, and again, it was the system. It was system driven, and they played in a bad Pac-12. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, that was back, remember, Vince, when the Pac-12 wasn't playing much defense.
Oh, I remember. I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't playing a lot of defense, recently.
In the Pac-12 that year, Colorado gave up 46 points a game. Arizona gave up 35.3. Washington State gave up 33.7. Cal gave up 33.1. UCLA gave up 27.6. Utah gave up 25.1. Then Washington, USC, and Arizona all gave up between 24.2 to 24.3. Oregon gave up 21.6. Oregon State gave up 20.6. And Stanford gave up 17.2. Stanford was the only team that year that really did anything.
That played defense.
Yes, at all. And then when you look at their numbers against FBS teams, so you take out FCS games, only one team gave up fewer than 22 points a game, and only 3 teams gave up fewer than 24 points per game.
Wow.
So like you look at Oregon and they gave up 21.6 points per game, but then you put in the, FBS, that's obviously goes back up almost a touchdown.
Yeah.
So it was a really bad defensive league at the time. It was. And Utah was just beginning their transition from being a group of 5 team to the FCS or to the Power 5 level. If you remember that, they were in the Mountain West a couple years before that. So it's a little bit there. Like that was 2012. Notre Dame played Utah 2 years prior. And remember in 2010, and they were a Mountain West team.
Right.
So like they were beginning that transition. So yeah, it was tough. So yeah, I'm buying Impact. I'm selling them doing that from a standpoint of stats.
Yep. Agreed. Ballpeen Shillelagh this season, or buy, sell, hold this season. The Love Price duo. We got the running back questions here. I like this.
Well, the one before from Jace was the first question.
Okay.
This one I moved up
to
the number 2, so that way we could kind of knock both of them out.
Gotcha. This season, the Love Price duo will statistically outperform the Estimé Diggs duo from 22 in yards per carry, touchdowns, etc. So across the board, I guess.
Yeah, that's so yards. See, well, I'm having it because again, we're looking at this from a 12+1 standpoint, Vince. That's I'm a little torn on this, and let me explain why. In yards per carry, I'll say yes for sure. That one I'm very confident in. Audri was at 5.9. Logan was at 4.98. You put them together, they were around 5.5. Yes, they'll have more. They'll do better than that. This duo to me will be over 6 because Audri jumped up to 6.4 last year. So I think this duo will be around 6+ yards per carry as a tandem. Like that, that's where I'm at with those two. Touchdowns, they had 15 rushing touchdowns that year. The reason I'm hesitant on that one simply because of the presence of Riley Leonard.
Yeah.
And there's a chance that neither one of those guys are the goal line backs. I personally would probably have Jadarian starting the season off as my goal line back, but I won't be shocked if by some point in time in the season it's Kedron Young. That won't shock me if he's healthy. Yeah, but 15 touchdowns, more than 15 touchdowns in a 12+1. I'm gonna hold that one, Vince, just because I just need to see how the running back rotation shakes out a little bit. But if I had to pick one and you're like, no, you can't hold, man, I'd probably buy. There's just a couple things that give me hesitancy on the touchdowns one, and that is the aspect of the presence of Riley Leonard. I mean, that season that Audric had 11 and Logan had 4, you had 6 touchdowns from your quarterbacks and then 3 from your other running back. I could see Riley Leonard doing that by himself. I mean, Riley Leonard had 13 touchdowns 2 years ago. He was on pace for 10 touchdowns last year. I don't know that he'll necessarily get to that, but he'll at least give you 7 or 8. And then I also think they're going to throw for a lot more touchdowns. I mean, that team in 2022 only passed for 25 touchdowns. I think they'll be over 30 this year. Now they say, okay, but they only average 31.8 points per game, and I think they'll be almost 10 points better than that this year, at least 7 to 8 points minimum. Okay, so there's a lot of back and forth on that, Vince. So I'm going to buy the yards per carry. I'm going to hold the touchdowns, but if you force me to do that, I would say I'd probably buy it. And then yards, I'll say rushing. It's the same thing as before, Vince. It's like, okay, how will the impact of Riley Leonard and the fact that I think this team's going to blow a lot more teams out than that team did, where they were playing 4-quarter games back then. That factors into it. So rushing yards, I'm going to slightly buy it. But total yards, easy buy, because I think the receiving aspect will be much greater. The two running backs that year, Logan Diggs had 10 catches for 211 yards. Audri had 9 for 135. I definitely think they passed that.
Oh, yeah.
That up. Definitely think they passed that up.
Agree with
I think Jeremiah might do that by himself.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. He'll get that solo. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Irish English buy sell.
I thought I might have had to take that one. I saw what was going on back there. So.
Yeah, you're right. It died. Buy one, sell one, hold one to win their conference. Kansas State, Penn State, Miami.
Okay, the buy is easy. That's K-State.
Yes, that's the easy one.
They are actually my pick to win the conference this year, to be honest with you.
Spoiler.
Yeah, at least as of right now. Right, could always change my mind, but that's where I have them right now. Because we were originally going to do Big 12 today, but I have a little bit more time to dive into that, and so when we do this on next week, it may change my opinion. But right now, I have them winning the league. I'm going to hold Miami because I think Miami's talent level is closer and coaching is closer to them being on par with Florida State and Clemson from a roster standpoint and a schedule standpoint than I believe Penn State is to those other teams. Now, we talked a little bit about Penn State maybe being a little bit of a dark horse and in the Big Ten, but it's a dark horse to be in the title game, maybe. I don't really think that they're a team that's going to go out there and necessarily win the Big Ten. They're a dark horse, but like Miami, I think has a better path to that because in the Big Ten, like I don't think Miami's on the same level talent-wise or coaching-wise as Florida State or Clemson, definitely not coaching-wise. But I think their talent's pretty close. But the thing about Miami is their schedule's somewhat favorable. They have to play at Louisville, which is not going to be easy, and they get Florida State at home. They don't play Clemson. They get Duke at home. They don't play North Carolina. They get Virginia Tech at home, who I think could be dangerous. They play at Cal, at Georgia Tech, which could be tough, at Syracuse, Wake Forest at home, so they don't get NC State. They don't, as I said, they don't get Clemson or NC State. Like their schedule's somewhat favorable. And then you look at Penn State and you look at their Big Ten schedule this year, and Penn State has to play Ohio State, right? They get them at home. They get Washington at home, but they've got to play at USC, at Wisconsin, at Minnesota. So I think that's just a little bit of a tougher road for me. Now, the good thing is they don't have to play Oregon. They don't have to play Michigan, but playing Ohio State, like the 3-game stretch of 4-game stretch really of at USC, at Wisconsin, home against Ohio State, home against Washington is tougher than anything that Miami's going to have to play in that type of 4-game stretch. So I'm gonna that's kind of where I'm at on that one, Vince. So buy K-State, hold Miami, sell Penn State. And then, of course, there's the James Franklin factor.
I was going to say that my whole reasoning for selling Penn State would be James Franklin's not going to be able to win you.
I just wanted to give more than just that. I mean,
I totally get it.
It is a great point.
Look, you went the analytical side. That's the way you should go. I take emotional side. I take the I think he's a terrible in-game coach, and that's all I need to know.
But I don't think that's emotional, Vince. I think that's analytical.
Well, that's fair too.
You have evidence of this. This isn't just
that's true.
I don't like him, and so I'm going to say this. It's like, no, this is his history.
I'll save that for the next one.
That's evidence.
Yeah. Irish English with another one. Buy one, hold one, sell one to make the playoffs. Alabama, LSU, USC. That for me, this one is fairly easy.
I'm buying Bama.
Yep.
Holding USC,
Yep.
selling LSU.
That's exactly what I was going to do as well. Yes.
I actually think LSU is going to be could be a better team than USC. I actually think they're going to beat USC in the opener.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about who's the better team. It's just about the road to making the playoff for LSU is going to be a lot harder than I think it will be for USC. So this isn't like, oh, I hate Brian Kelly. No, Brian Kelly's been in the playoffs twice. You know what I mean? Like in a 4-team playoff, it's more about being objective. It's the road to that level. I think Alabama's by far the best team on this list.
Yes.
I think LSU's probably the second best team on this list. I think USC right now still there's a lot that Lincoln Riley has to prove to me, but I think their roster is a lot better than people think.
Yeah.
But their schedule to me is more challenging. That's really what it boils down to for me, Vince. I mean, LSU's schedule isn't easy by any stretch of imagination. I mean, LSU this year, we talked about it when we did our SEC preview. They've got to play USC at home, but then their conference schedule, they get out South Carolina, home against Ole Miss, at Arkansas, at A&M, home against Bama, at Florida, and home against Oklahoma. Like that's a tough schedule, but they don't get Georgia, they don't get Tennessee. Yeah, they got to play at A&M, they got to play at Arkansas, but they get Ole Miss and Bama both at home, and Oklahoma at home. And then you look at USC's schedule, and this year they got to play at Michigan. They've got to play at UCLA. They got to play at Washington. They get Penn State at home, Wisconsin at home, Nebraska at home. Now, the thing that helps them is they don't have to play Ohio State or Oregon, which is a plus. But at Michigan and at Maryland's not a cakewalk either, Vince. Like that team's got some athletes at UCLA, at Washington. And then you've got Nebraska, who I think can win 9 or 10 games at home. You've got Penn State, who I think could win 9 or 10 games at home. You get Wisconsin at home. I don't know how they're going to be, but it's still Wisconsin. You just never know. I just think that road is a little bit tougher to me for USC than it is for LSU. Or for LSU than it is for USC. Like USC schedule's tough, but LSU's to me is just a little bit tougher in conference. Plus, there's more teams with better rosters in the SEC than for LSU than there are teams with better rosters in the Big Ten compared to USC. So for all those reasons, buy Bama, sell LSU, hold USC.
Just had a vision of, have you ever watched Shark Tank?
No.
Okay. They always say, and for all those reasons, I'm out. I was like, oh, Brian's out.
Yeah, I'm out on anything that Mark Cuban's associated with.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Good. These are good ones so far.
Irish English, buy one, sell one, hold one as a legitimate Heisman contender. Define that how you will. We've got Nico Iamaleava. I think that's how you say it. Will Howard and Brady Cook.
I'm buying Nico because I think the numbers I think Tennessee's going to have a good team this year. And I think his numbers are going to be really good. I think he's going to put up some good numbers because of the offense is number one. It's designed to put up big numbers. I mean, even last year, Joe Milton threw for 2,800 yards, and Joe Milton's just not a very good quarterback. You look at the year before, with what they threw for over 4,000 yards the year before. I think Nico's going to put up very good numbers. I think Nico handled himself very well in a bowl game against Iowa, right? I mean, it performed well, didn't put up big numbers, but made good throws, made good reads, and that's against one of the best secondaries in college football. And so I would say statistically, I think Tennessee's going to be a 9+ win team. All that should help him have a better stance. Brady Cook, you could make a case for off numbers, and they're going to be a good team. I just don't think he's that good. And I think when teams are going to look at him, there's going to be such a clear gap between the two best players on the team and him that it's going to make it hard for him to really win that award. Like it's sort of like a poor man's version of 2020. When you had Devontae Smith and Mac Jones were 1 and 2 in Heisman Trophy contenders, right? Mac Jones put up crazy numbers that year and still couldn't win the Heisman Trophy. Why? Because the perception is that the reality is, and it was the perception was also true, is that he wasn't nearly as good as the guy he was throwing to. I mean, Mac Jones passed for 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, and 4 picks, and didn't win the Heisman. Why? Because he had the best receiver in the country on his team. Well, Brady Cook's not going to come anywhere close to throwing for those type of numbers. He's not nearly as good of a quarterback as Mac Jones. And he also has arguably the best receiver in college football and Luther Burden on his team. Plus you have Theo Weiss. You've got Mookie Cooper. Like I don't think anyone's going to look at Brady Cook and say, "Hey, he's that guy." But I do think the numbers will be there, and I don't think Missouri's going to be as good as they were last year either, Vince. So that also factors in. And if you're going to win if you're going to be a Heisman contender at Missouri, not only do you need crazy numbers, but you need to go out there and win a bunch of games. And I just don't think that they're going to do that. I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. He's a solid quarterback, but I mean, last year Missouri won 11 games, and their starting running back ran for over 1,600 yards, and he finished 8th in Heisman Trophy voting. Right? I mean, it's going to be tough. So I'm selling him, and the only reason I'm putting a hold on Will Howard is because I think the Heisman Trophy overinflates the quarterback to the good teams. And as of right now, I have Ohio State as one of my top 3 or 4 teams.
Yep.
I honestly, if you were asking me to buy, sell, hold each of them individually, I would have held Nico and sold both of those other 2 guys. I don't think either one of them, because I don't even know that Will Howard's going to be the starting quarterback by the end of the year.
Oh, ouch.
I don't. I mean, it would not shock me if Julian Sand is the starting quarterback for them at some point in time, or maybe even Aaron Noland at some point in time. So I don't think Will Howard's that good of a quarterback, but at least if he's the quarterback all year, he'd at least be the quarterback on what is going to be a top 3 or 4 team.
Right. Yeah,
in my
for
opinion.
sure. And that's
why
you have to be on a good team to win the Heisman. You just do these days.
Unless you have crazy numbers like Lamar Jackson had in 2016.
Fair enough. But neither one of these 3 guys
was good. I mean, they were 9-4. I think the year he won the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
Right.
You still have to have some Heisman moments.
Right.
And he usually come in wins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
But Lamar passed for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns that year, and also rushed for 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns.
That's crazy.
Like, that's the kind of crazy numbers that you need to go out and win a Heisman Trophy when your team is, 9-4 that year.
Right.
Right. So, yes. Yeah. I think they lost both of the big games they played in, I believe, that year, because they lost to Clemson. And let me see here. They lost to Clemson 42-36, but they did play competitively. They did beat number 2 Florida State 63-20, but as we found out that year, Florida State was not that good. But still, 9-10 win team.
Sure. And
you beat them by 40. So he didn't have that big win that year. But it was the numbers. Mm-hmm. It was the numbers. I mean, they lost to Houston. They lost to that year to Houston late in the year by 26. They lost to Kentucky at the end of the season, but the numbers were just nuts. I mean, the numbers that Lamar put up, and not just numbers, but he was also tremendous.
Oh, it's a human highlight reel.
He 100% should have won the Heisman that year.
Yeah,
I mean, he deserved it. Yeah.
Every time you saw him play, he was doing something spectacular, whether it was in a win or a loss.
Right.
But I mean, when you're that kind of a dude.
And he put that. I mean, if you take him off that team, they have a losing record.
But he's a generational kind of kid, though, too.
Yes.
Like, you're not going to get that from any one of these 3 guys for sure. And, just from an athletic standpoint, you're not going to get that kind of highlight reel type stuff.
Right.
So they're going to have to be associated with a winning team. And by winning, I mean making the playoffs.
Agree.
Ball peen shillelagh. Buy, sell, hold. The Mitchapalooza play from Reese's offense should have had a wrinkle where Mitch jumped past to a wide receiver who had snuck out to the side. I was waiting for that one the whole season and never got to see it.
I'm selling that, because if they tried that and it went incomplete, we'd all be saying, how do you not give the ball to Audri Estimé at the 2-yard line? You know what I mean? Like, no. I mean, it's fun, but make them stop Audric first. Right. And if they prove they can stop Audric, then maybe have something else.
Sure.
It's like that article I read to you, Vince, remember the article I found? Somebody sent me an article of they found from when I was in high school.
Oh, yeah.
Baseball interview. I was like, well, they can't hit my fastball. So until they figure out how to hit my fastball, I'm not going to do anything else. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I would be with inside the 5-yard line. Well, when they figure out how to stop Audric, then I'll think about coming up with something
doing something different.
I'm being a bit hyperbolic because you always have a plan, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
sure,
that ain't it.
And I guarantee you that was in the offense. Like, that was a play that had. They just never ran it. So yeah,
I'm sure. I'm almost positive that Tommy Rees had it in his offense. I don't know about Jared Parker. I mean, and when I say that, I literally don't know. I never heard anything about that. I'm pretty confident that Tommy had that in his offense in 2022.
Me too.
But again, you didn't need it. You had Audri, Logan. You just didn't need it. So I'm selling that. It would have been fun to see, but I'm selling that.
Yeah.
Like they play that play all the time for like Tim Tebow, and
but even that was out of the gun.
But but they act like this was some like crazy thing that Tim Tebow did, and it's just like, yeah, but that's like one of the least impressive plays Tim Tebow ever had. But it gets shown all the time, and it's like, of all the crazy things Tim Tebow did, why do we care about a jump pass?
Right.
Like it just some of the things that people think are really cool, I just don't think are really cool.
Right.
But but they showed it on Sports Center a million times, and
that's why it's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's why it's cool.
Hard pass. It was going good there for a minute, Vince.
I was going to say, you're like doing some hardcore fixing.
Well, my screen went out, so like I was able to scroll through it, but I couldn't. When it goes to where I can't change it, I have to, take it off of full screen and then do all that, and it's like I couldn't do that because my screen was out, but I could still see it down here.
Gotcha.
But we're good now, man. We have a few of them, these from Ballpeen Shillelagh, actually. Hold on a second.
All right.
Looks like it's still not letting me do it. So let's get here real fast. It's a little annoying. There we go. All right. Now we're good.
And another one. Buy, sell, hold. By the end of fall camp, Notre Dame will be a betting odds favorite to beat Texas A&M by at least 3 points.
This is all you, Vince, because I'm not a betting guy, so I don't ever want to give betting advice other than don't waste your hard-earned money on gambling.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they are ever going to do that because they want to keep the betting lines even on each side. That's the whole point of Vegas. They don't want a bunch of money on one side. That's just stupid. That's not a good business model. So, maybe it will end up that way if enough people are putting money on the other side. Maybe it grows to that. I think that if we're just talking about the way the game is supposed to be played, then it should be at least 3 points. Like the way that the game is going to end up, I think it should be at least 3 points. But that's not the way they do betting. That's not really how it works. So I will buy it because I think the line is going to move, especially once people get their eyes on Riley Leonard, a healthy Riley Leonard. I think that will make a big difference in this game from a betting standpoint. So I will buy the 3-point spread in Notre Dame's favor. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will enter each regular season game they play this season as the betting odds favorite. I will buy that as well because their toughest game arguably is Florida State, and that is a home game. So Notre Dame will automatically get a couple of points there. I think they will be the better team anyway going into that game, so they'll be the favorite. The next game where they have the chance of being an underdog would be USC, but I don't think USC's schedule will warrant that. And so Notre Dame will be the favorite going into that game as well. So, yeah, I think they'll be the favorite.
I will say this about that, Vince. If the line changes and they're the favorite against A&M, then they will be the favorite the rest of the year. I think between Notre Dame and USC or Florida State, the team that's going to be favored is going to be the home team.
Yeah.
Even if they're both really good, then it'll be the home team will be favored.
You'll have a few games under your belts as far as being able to see both teams play too, which I think is going to be important. I think there's a lot of doubters out there about Notre Dame. I get it, there always are, but once they start playing some games and once they play Texas A&M specifically, you're going to see some people start coming around a little bit towards Notre Dame. So I think they will be the odds-on favorite.
Well, and from a betting standpoint, but like ESPN has Notre Dame as the number 5 team in the country. Notre Dame's a consensus top 10 team. And I think if they beat A&M, then I don't see them being a favorite, like being an underdog at all, unless they just have a collapse. I just don't see it.
Right. Or if like Riley Leonard gets hurt, or there's a a drastic injury to a very important player, whoever that may be.
Vince, we got to get you a new chair.
You can hear it.
We got to put some WD-40 or something on that chair, man. Like Or you just got to sit there for 3 hours and not move.
It is a old chair. That is for sure.
It is a very creaky chair. So you and I are going to have a talk about it a little bit.
Right.
IB gift. It's a business expense, right?
I'm all about
it. Shows. Yeah, we need to get you a new chair.
You're hilarious.
Sorry. Just pause between this next one so we can cut this part out. But I was like, you know how I am with noises?
I do.
You know how my little condition that I have? So I was like, okay, Vince.
That's why I'm laughing.
Don't make me come over there.
Well, it's only when
you're going to come home and that chair's going to be in your front yard broken in a million pieces.
It's only when I put my arms on the handle.
No, it's whenever you move. It's literally whenever you move. Okay. But that's sideways, but lean in any direction. And it's
that's true.
And you're doing a lot of this in today's show.
Yeah,
your itchy back is.
I don't know what the deal is. I'm antsy today.
I understand. I get that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Bozilla 14 buy, sell, hold. Michigan State will make a bowl game in Jonathan Smith's first year.
Man.
This is a great question.
I would love to buy that. Because I'm a big Jonathan Smith fan, but I just don't. Let me look at so Florida Atlantic at home, at Maryland, home against Prairie View A&M, at BC, home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home against Iowa, at Michigan State, home against Indiana, at Illinois, home against Purdue, home against Rutgers. They got a chance. You have Florida Atlantic, Prairie View A&M as wins. Let's say they beat Indiana at home, beat Purdue at home, beat Rutgers at home. So if they hold firm at home against everybody not named Ohio State and Iowa, they're 5-7. So then you've got to maybe upset Iowa at home, which I think they're capable of doing. You have to win, and then you'd have to win one of at BC, home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home against Iowa, at Michigan, at Illinois. You'd have to win one of those.
I think they could beat Illinois, and I think they can also beat Boston College.
Illinois on the road is going to be tough, but between at BC, between that, and then between at Iowa at home and Illinois on the road, I think you can win one of those.
Yeah.
And, look, Michigan State was not very good last year. They were not a very good team last year, but big part of that was all the drama and all the craziness that was going on off the field. And I think that really hurt that football team. And on top of them just not being overly talented and not having much at quarterback. And there just was a lot of reasons. I think their quarterback room is going to be better this year. I think they have some decent players coming back. I just think they're going to be a more cohesive team than they were last year. I mean, and they had some close losses last year, but they got their butts kicked a lot too. I mean, they really did. They got blown out by Washington, got blown out at home by Maryland, lost by 10 at Iowa, got blown out by Michigan, got blown out by Ohio State, got blown out by Penn State. And then had a nice home win over Nebraska, beat Indiana at Indiana, lost on the road at Minnesota, lost on the road at Rutgers by 3. So this year you get Rutgers at home. Can they win that game? Of course. They almost beat Rutgers last year, and Rutgers was pretty solid last year, and Michigan State was terrible.
They only lost by 3.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly capable. They're certainly capable of that. Again, you got to win at. So it's at Maryland, at BC, home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home against Iowa, at Michigan, at Illinois. Of those 7 games, you win 2 of them, you're probably in a great position. Because now you win 2 of them, you're also in the spot, Vince, where you can lose one of those ones you're supposed to win. And still be at 6-6.
Exactly.
You know what?
I'm buying it.
Buy that.
I'm all over this.
I had to talk myself into it because I really like Jonathan Smith.
Yeah,
I love the quarterback he got that he brought with him from Oregon State.
I love it. I wish, to be honest with you, I wish their specialists weren't as young as they are. I'll leave it at that.
I get that.
I'll leave it at that.
I get that
because we really enjoy going up there. So yeah. Buy, sell, hold. Michigan State will compete with the top half of the new Big Ten Conference. The way the program was competitive in the 2010s with Mark D'Antonio at the helm within 5 years of Jonathan Smith's tenure. So you're giving us 5 years on this one.
Yeah.
And so top half means top 9?
Well, he's probably thinking like top 5 or 6. Okay. Like when you think top half, you're thinking like the old school Big Ten is what I think he's probably getting to.
Okay.
I'll say this, Vince. That's a tougher one to really. I mean, it's so hard in today's era of college football to look 5 years down the road.
Solid point. So much can change.
But part of me, I want to take this because he did it in the Pac-12 during a time when the Pac-12 started getting kind of good the last couple of years.
Sure.
and he won 8-9 games and had some big wins over those teams.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have some of those teams in the league now. You've beat those teams in recent years when you were at Oregon State. And he'll most likely have more talent at Michigan State than he had at Oregon State, I would assume. And so I think once he gets through that stink, now what I mean, so when I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to buy it from the standpoint of the very specific thing of they're going to be able to compete with those teams in the top section. The top 5, they're going to compete with them.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do what they did under D'Antonio, which is playing the Big Ten title game multiple times during that stretch. That I don't see, because the Big Ten's way better now than it was then. I mean, if you remember when Mark D'Antonio was really rolling in the Big Ten, Ohio State was very good, but the rest of the league took a big step back. Because remember, 2010, he goes 11-2. That started a year where in 5 of 6 years, they won at least 11 games. The 3 years before that, 7-6, 9-4, 6-7. Well, what was true in the Big Ten around that time? That's when the Penn State scandal happened, right? Which Penn State went on probation. They struggled. Michigan went down to crapper for a number of years with Rich Rod and then Brady Hoke. They weren't very good. So there were some periods there where the Big Ten wasn't that good. And they took advantage of it. And that to me is something that's going to would factor into why they weren't good. I mean, in 2010, when Michigan State won the Big Ten that season, there was only 2 Big Ten teams or 2 other Big Ten teams that finished that year ranked. Michigan was 7-6, Penn State was 7-6, Iowa was 8-5, and Illinois was 7-6. Ohio State finished ranked. They were on probation that year. 2011, Penn State goes 11-2, loses the Big Ten title game to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was pretty good that year. They were 11-3. Nebraska finished ranked. Michigan finished ranked that year, in a bit of an anomaly. And Iowa wasn't very good. They were 7-6. Penn State was only 9-4. Illinois wasn't that good, and Ohio State went 6-7. That was the Luke Fickell year. So, and then 2012, obviously Ohio State was better. They got Urban back. Michigan was 8-5 that year. Northwestern was one of the better teams in the Big Ten that year. Michigan State wasn't that good. Nebraska was okay. Penn State wasn't ranked in the top 25. Wisconsin went 8-6. Then 2013, Michigan State gets back on track. That was their 13-1 season. Ohio State was obviously very good that year. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, if you remember that. So they beat a very good Ohio State team. But that year, Iowa finished 8-5. Nebraska went 9-4. Michigan was 7-6. Wisconsin was 9-4. Penn State was 7-5. Like, you get what I'm saying, Vince? Like, the league was just not that good back then, outside of Ohio State and occasionally Wisconsin. In 2014, another example, Michigan State goes 11-2. They were very good that year, finished 5th in the country. Ohio State wins a national title. Wisconsin finishes 11-3. No other Big Ten teams finished ranked. Penn State went 7-6. Michigan went 5-7. They were terrible. Iowa went 7-6. They were bad. And so they dominated really when the Big Ten was down. And then, of course, 2015 was the last really good year for Penn State or Michigan State. They had one more kind of bounce back year in 2017, but even then they stopped being competitive. So in 2017, they won 10 games, but they got blasted by Ohio State. I mean, remember, they were beating Ohio State early in that year, and that's the year they lost, it was 48-3 or something like that. It was just ridiculous. But that 2015 team that went 12-2, obviously they had a great win over Ohio State. Iowa was pretty good that year. Michigan started to bounce back. Penn State wasn't better. So, again, you're seeing the Big Ten starts to ascend a little bit. It's getting better and better and better, and that's when Michigan State started to falter. There were some other reasons why they started to falter too, Vince. That they went 3-9 in 2016. Part of it was the reality that Mark D'Antonio went away from what was working for him and started recruiting some higher-ranked guys that came in with some major attitudes. And there was a lot of trouble in the locker room. He lost the locker room and things like that. So it was partly that, but the big reason why is just the Big Ten got better. Harbaugh made the Big Ten better. Urban got Ohio State back on track. Wisconsin started doing better. James Franklin, for all his flaws, made Penn State a lot better than they were at the beginning of that tenure. And so I just think a lot of those things factored into why Michigan State was able to rise the way that they were. They were kicking Michigan's butt for a number of years for in-state recruits because they didn't want to go play for Rich Rod and Brady Hoke. But that's not the case anymore. So, they can't rely on that again the way they did in the past. But I think Jonathan Smith is going to have some of the national connections that I think he'll be able to win. Plus, I think he's just a really good football coach. So they'll be competitive against those teams. I don't see them being a team that finishes in the top 3 to 4 to 5 with any kind of regularity, even with the really good. Because now, not only that, Vince, Michigan's better, Ohio State's better, Penn State's better, but now you've added USC, you've added Oregon, you've added Washington and UCLA to the league. 3 of those 4 teams are just going to almost always have more talent than you have. That's just the reality of it.
It'll be a situation where they'll be in the upper half, I think, all the time, but the upper quarter every once in a while. So like they'll be here, and then they'll have a year where they peak and they'll be up there, and then they'll go back down to being in the top half, and then they'll peak and then they'll go back down. So that's how I see Michigan State being. There'll be some years where they'll compete for the Big Ten, depending on how the other teams are doing.
That one senior laden team of guys.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Because I do think they'll have the good coaching, and I do think that they will have a good foundation. I think Michigan State is going to become a program, and it's tough to say this in this day and age, but I still think they're going to become a program where you're going to see less in and out with the portal. I think you're going to see some more development from that staff, that kind of thing. And that will pay off like every 3rd year or every 4th year. You know what I mean? And you'll have that senior class that's been together this whole time, and it'll lead them to being competitive in the Big Ten for that year. And then that class will leave, and then they'll kind of have to get another class to figure it out. That's how I see this group being, as long as Jonathan Smith sticks around for an extended period of time, which I hope he does. I think Michigan State could be kind of a sleeping giant to a degree, like in that you can become very comfortable at Michigan State in the football program, knowing that, hey, we're always going to finish in the top half of the league, and every once in a while we're going to jump up and bite some people.
And they will consistently have an impact on who wins the Big Ten.
Yes, there you go.
Even in years where they're 8-4, they're going to knock off somebody, and that loss is the reason why. Like, you don't want to be a Big Ten title contender heading to East Lansing in November.
Yeah,
like when he's got that program in.
Yes.
Again, they're going to be 9-3, 8-4, occasionally 7-5, but even in those 7-5 years, because the Big Ten's also going to hand some of those teams gauntlet schedules because they don't want to give those to Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan because they want to create an easier road for them. You're going to see those years where, they go 8-4, 7-5, but they're the reason Michigan's not playing in the Big Ten title game, or they're the reason Penn State's not playing because they got knocked off in November or October at Michigan State. And you're like, how the heck did that happen? You're like, well, that was actually a really salty team. They had a crazy schedule. They went 8-4, but they beat Michigan and beat Penn State, but lost to Oregon, lost to Ohio State, lost to Iowa on the road, and then lost to Nebraska on the road, something like that. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing too. Somebody had mentioned it in the chat, but I think it was Andrew Gilmore mentioned, it's not just those good teams too. Michigan, Ohio State's still rolling, Penn State's, but Matt Rule's got Nebraska headed in a good direction, right? So like that's a good hire. I don't buy the Wisconsin's going to be good too. I need to see that. I think Luke Fickell's got to show me a lot more for me to think he's going to be able to have that success. Because I think a lot of what built Luke Fickell's success at Cincinnati was not Luke Fickell. It was Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden, Mike Denbrock, Mike Mickens, guys like that. And so he's got to show me he can do that. We'll see if he can. But the league is a lot better moving forward. I mean, you've got Greg Schiano at Rutgers now, who's doing some really good things. They're going to knock off some teams. You're like, man, how does Michigan State beat Penn State one week and then go on the road and lose to Rutgers the next? Because you're like, that's a scrappy Rutgers team that personnel-wise matches up with Penn State style of play-wise.
Right.
Things like that. It's why I think right now I do think the Big Ten has a chance to become the best conference in college football over the next 5 years. It has a chance. It has a chance. I'm not saying it's going to be that, but it has a chance because I just think the coaching in that league is better than what it is in the SEC.
Yeah, they'll be deeper than
top to bottom. Like
right.
I don't know if you have any coach in the Big Ten. Maybe Dan Lanning if he can prove himself. Maybe Lincoln if he can get his head out of his what. I don't think Ryan Day's a great coach. Like there's no Kirby Smart in that league. There's no Lane Kiffin, and there's some guys at the top that are really good. Steve Sarkisian, but there's also a lot of not very good in that league as well. And I think the Big Ten, even PJ Fleck, who I can't stand, that's not a bad football coach. Guy's a good football coach. I mean, he's won a lot of games. So those are things that I look at, Vince, and say those things are going to factor into why I feel the way that I feel.
Yeah.
But they're just not going to be the team that's playing the Big Ten title game almost every year like they were during that one stretch.
Right. Bozilla 14, buy, sell, hold. Northwestern will be a bowl team again this year.
I'm selling that. I think their schedule's a little tougher. I think last year they kind of had that rallying cry.
Yeah,
for the coaching change. And I think, there's some things that kind of help them from the standpoint of they won some games over a not super competitive schedule, Vince. I mean, if we're being honest, they got beat by Duke in the non-conference. I'm actually pulling their schedule up now.
Battle of the Purple against Washington.
Oh,
it's gonna be a lot of purple that day.
Yeah, that's gross. They lost to Rutgers. They beat UTEP, beat Minnesota, beat Howard, beat Maryland, beat Wisconsin, beat Purdue, beat Illinois. That was their non-conference. They got blown out by Duke, got blown out by Rutgers, got blown out by Penn State, and then lost 2 low-scoring games to Iowa and Nebraska. So like they didn't have to play Michigan, and then this year you look at their schedule, and it's not going to. They're not going to be able to get away with that.
Michigan back to back.
Yeah, I mean,
look. Bottom line here, Brian, I'm selling this. I think they lose game 1
to Miami of Ohio.
I do.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, they got to play at Washington, at Maryland, at Iowa, at Purdue, at Michigan.
Schedule.
They could lose all those.
Yes.
And then they got to play Ohio State at home. They've got to play Illinois at home. And I think Illinois is going to be a decent team this year. And then they got to play Wisconsin at home. And then Indiana at home, is a game they should win. But it's not going to be a cakewalk. And then Duke, at home is not going to be a cakewalk either. I mean, Duke's beat the crap out of Northwestern the last 2 years. I mean, Duke beat them 38-14 last year. Riley Leonard destroyed them last year. Now, they don't have Riley anymore. But, they lost to Duke at home 2 years ago as well, in game 2 of the Mike Elko tenure. So I just think they won a lot last year off of the rallying cry, us against the world type of thing. And I just think they come back down to earth this year against a tougher schedule. I mean, their crossover games last year, Vince, were not exactly gauntlets, right? I mean, they had Penn State, who killed them. Their other crossover game was Indiana, I think, right?
They play Indiana, I believe.
No, I'm saying their crossover games last year. So they're in the West and they play some teams from the East. They didn't get Michigan, they didn't get Ohio State, they didn't get Michigan State. They had to play Indiana, Rutgers, and Penn State. And they got blown out in 2 of those 3 games because the East was way better than the West last year. And so this year there is no East-West. You don't get all the West teams this year.
Everybody.
Yep. You get drawn from everybody. So I'm going to sell that.
Yep.
Agreed. I hope I'm wrong because I love what David Braun's doing and I think it's a good story, but I think they come back down to earth this year, Vince.
Yep. Agreed. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will not renew the series with Stanford after the contract expires at the end of this year.
I'm going to sell that just because I think Notre Dame is going to – I hope that I'm wrong. I'm going to sell that, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope they don't. I just don't care about that rivalry anymore. I don't. But I get why they do it. So I'm going to sell it because I do think that I don't know that they'll renew it for next season.
Yeah.
But I think they'll renew it at some point in time. They may take a year or 2 off and then renew it, but
I hope they don't renew it for every season, though.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean by. Yeah. I think that's what they mean by renew it.
Just put them in the ACC rotation, man.
Yeah, that's and again, I've said I'm fine playing Stanford a lot more than normal. Even if it's 6 times out of every 10 years. You know what I mean? Give me 4 games on. Maybe 2 years off, 2 on, 2 off, something like that, where I play them more than just I do the other teams, but just not every single year.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it for Notre Dame anymore, in my opinion. I am curious because you look at next year's schedule, Vince.
I'm looking at it right now.
And they've got A&M at home, Purdue at home, Boise at home, USC at home, Navy at home, NC State at home, and Syracuse at home, right? So they've got 11 games scheduled. The game they're going to have to play on the other game they're going to have to play next year is going to have to be a road game. And so it would make sense if you've got USC at home. So, I mean, it would actually make sense next year to add Stanford and play them out there at the end of the year, I guess, because you got to have a road game anyway. But I don't know. I'm kind of tired of that series. Maybe just extend it for 2 years and then whatever.
I'm not kind of tired of it. I'm super tired of it. And the thing is, they don't have that. I mean, I guess they got the Boise State game for next year, but usually they kind of have 2 lower games, I guess is the best way to put it. You know what I mean? Not, I don't want to be an FBS team.
Yeah, but you're not going to have 8 home games.
No, I'm not saying it has to be a home game. Right. I'm just saying I'm
and you're curious. not going to play Miami of Ohio on the road.
That's true.
You know, like you're going to play it. They're going to play another Power 5 or you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, because otherwise you should have scheduled Boise on the road because that'd have been a cool thing. But
yeah,
it's going to have to be another Power 5. Like, so, I mean, their schedule next year is going to be like Navy and Boise as non-Power 5s, and then the rest of their schedule is going to be all Power 5 teams because they've, like I said, they've got next year's one of those.
Yeah, the way it's locked.
Next year's one of those 5 ACC years, 5 teams, because sometimes they only play 4 ACC teams. You only have to play 4 every year, but next year's one of those 5 ACC teams. They play BC, Miami, NC State, Syracuse, and Pitt.
And they've got 5 and 26.
Of course, they've got USC and Navy. Right. And then they have Arkansas as a makeup game, and then A&M, Purdue, and Boise State. So you're going to have to play a game on the road. And my question is going to be who? Why not Stanford? Who's not going to at least probably not be that good?
Yeah. You got 5 ACC teams on the schedule for next year or for 26 as well. And there's only 10 games that have been announced. So it'll be interesting to see who those other 2 are.
Yeah. Yep.
We got to buy, sell, hold. Michigan State will have a better head-to-head record versus Michigan during Jonathan Smith's tenure. That's projecting. Holy
yeah. Oh boy, man, that's a tough one.
That's hard. I don't know. You talked about the recruiting and things of that nature, and how when Michigan State was really kind of not pounding on Michigan, but winning those games in more of a consecutive fashion. It's when guys didn't want to go to Michigan, and their recruiting wasn't very good.
They didn't want to go to Michigan, right? Because they sucked.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
I don't see Michigan falling off the table.
You know what?
In recruiting,
I'm curious about, Vince. Is I want to know what the record was for Michigan State before the last couple of years against Michigan, because obviously from 2008 to 2015, Michigan State won 7 of 8. Since then, Michigan is actually only 4-3. They blew them out the last 2 years, but in 21, Michigan State beat them. Remember that. In 2020, Michigan State beat them. In 19 and 18, Michigan won. And then in 17, Michigan State won again. And then in 16, Michigan won. So, I mean, I could see it being somewhat 50-50. It all comes down to if you believe in Sharon Moore. And to a degree, I'm not as prone to just drop that off, like to just dismiss that. You know, I'm really.
I hope it's true. I want it to be true. I want it to be true very badly.
Yeah,
but I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, because here's the thing: the reason that I'm hesitant, Vince, is because Michigan State held their own against Michigan for a chunk of the Jim Harbaugh era.
The early,
I mean, like Jim Harbaugh. Well, not even early. I mean, 2021, the playoff year, Michigan State beat them. The year that Michigan first went to the college football playoff, their only regular season loss that year was to Michigan State. You know what I mean? So, like, you know, the 2020 year, I don't count as much just because, you know, Michigan was pretty terrible that year. They were both pretty terrible that year. But, you know, I mean, I've been looking at some of Harbaugh's better teams at Michigan, Vince, and Michigan State had some wins over them. So you look at Michigan State beat Michigan in 2017. Michigan went 8-5 that year, so they were a little down. Michigan State won in 2015. Michigan went 10-3 that year, and so like they beat a good Harbaugh team that year. You know, so in 21 they beat a playoff version of Harbaugh. They won the Big Ten that year, beat Ohio State, right? I mean, and Michigan State beat them. So the question is, okay, but was that an anomaly or not? That's the question. So I just. Part of me wants to say I don't have a lot of faith. There's not a lot of evidence that Sharon Moore is going to be able to do what, you know, Harbaugh did. But I've said also that I'm going to not bet against Sharon Moore anymore because I thought him being hired as the O-line coach was a bad move. And it turned out to be a phenomenal move. And they're starting to recruit a little bit better. They're starting to find their footing as in recruiting standpoint. So I'm going to sell it, but I'm really back and forth on it. I want to respond to something in the chat because
okay.
Andrew Gilmore, sometimes people I don't get sometimes. So Andrew Gilmore said that he says about Stanford. He goes, it might be a good thing if we can avoid Stanford in a few years. I believe in that coach. He will eventually get them going. To which I responded, I said, this is someone who constantly is nitpicking and finding fault in Marcus Freeman. And he said it's apples to oranges. And he said the expectations are different. Like, no, my friend. The expectations are very different. My point is this. You just said you think Notre Dame should avoid Stanford. You're saying that Marcus Freeman is not a good enough coach to where we should be worried. We shouldn't be worried about Stanford. That's what you're saying. You're saying that, you're not comparing his success level to Mark. You're saying Notre Dame should avoid Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
So you are saying apples to apples. I think Stanford's going to give Notre Dame problems. Why? Because you think Troy Taylor's a great coach, which tells me you're constantly, again, finding fault in Marcus Freeman, and I don't understand that. And so, like, if you're talking about Notre Dame avoiding them, then it's apples to apples. It has nothing to do with expectations of this school versus that school. It is you don't think Notre Dame should play Stanford because you think that guy is going to do a better job at Stanford than Marcus Freeman is at Notre Dame, and that's why Notre Dame's going to have a hard time with Stanford. So it is apples to apples, and it makes no sense. I think Troy Taylor's going to do a nice job there. The guy's been a head football coach at the Power 5 level for 1 year, and his team went 3-9, and they got their brains beat in by Notre Dame last year. So, yeah, you want to compliment Stanford's coach and say, hey, I think Troy Taylor's going to do a good job at Stanford. And I would say, I agree with you. But that's not what you said. You said Notre Dame should avoid them. That's different than saying, I think he's a good football coach and will do well there. And then he will. I do like Troy Taylor as a coach. But to say that Notre Dame should avoid them for a couple years, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there with you.
Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, hold. Miami's current quarterback is in a much better place for success than the previous quarterback will be at his new location in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's talking about basically Cam Ward at Miami now compared to Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin. Yeah, I would say he's in a better situation. He's going to have much better talent around him. An offensive system that I think fits his skill more. I don't know how well Tyler Van Dyke's going to fit into Phil Longo's offense. I have no idea how well that's going to go.
Good call.
But, yeah, I'd buy that. I'll buy that.
Buy, sell, hold. Even if LSU makes a drastic jump to being a top 50 defense, that will still not be enough for them to make the playoff this season.
Buy. Because I think their defense, our offense is going to take a step back. Like, their offense is still going to be pretty good, right? They're not going to go from 45 points a game to 32. Like, their offense is going to be pretty good. They're going to have a great O-line. Their receivers are not as good as last year, but still talented. They have good running backs. And Garrett Nussmeier is not Jaden Daniels. He's a good football coach. He's a good football coach. I mean, a good quarterback. But he's not an elite quarterback, but he's good. He's just get the ball where it needs to go, man. He's a coach. I think he's the nephew. I think is he Doug Nussmeier's kid or is he Doug Nussmeier's nephew? I always forget that one. But the point is, he's a smart kid. He knows the game. He's his dad. Doug Nussmeier is the father of Garrett Nussmeier. So he's a coach's kid. He knows the game. He's smart. He did well in the bowl game last year. He did some good things in the bowl game last year. So I think he'll be good. I just don't think they're going to be like what they were last year. And even in the top 50 defense, they're still going to lose multiple games against that schedule. So I'm selling that.
What cracks me up about everything I've read about LSU and like the magazines and stuff, nobody mentions the fact that Mike Denbrock is not there anymore.
No,
they never talk about that.
That's Brian Kelly. Look, Brian Kelly's always had a way of convincing the media to believe whatever bull crap was coming out of his mouth. and he's telling people this is my offense. Yeah. My question was it your offense that Mike Denbrock used to beat your what in 2021 when you were at Notre Dame and Cincinnati came into your place and beat you by 10 points and it wasn't even really that close? It's not his offense. And if it is your offense, why weren't you running this stuff when you were at Notre Dame? Why'd you wait till you got to LSU to start running this offense?
Yeah,
Shut
exactly.
up. But that's who he is. He can't give credit to other people. It's all me. And so it's like, remember when you and I, well, you don't remember this. I remember I told you this. I'm watching the Wisconsin, because you covered the Wisconsin game. You were there. And I'm watching this game and I'm listening to Joe Klatt talk down the Notre Dame team. And I mean, they're undefeated. And he's talking them down, he's talking about what Kelly had told him. Wow, this team's this. It was just utter nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, this team's got, the schedule they play, they should win every game they play, but they're not going to because the head football coach isn't good enough to do that because he's too busy making excuses. So he's just, I can't stand that guy. All right, let's move on because I'm gonna go on a rant, and we don't have time for me to go on a rant. So I'm selling that they're gonna, or I'm buying. Excuse me, I'm actually buying Christopher's point. So I said sell, but I'm actually buying it. He's actually saying what we're saying. Even if they make a draft, get in the top 50, that won't be enough, and that I'm buying.
Yeah, agreed. Christopher Crosby again, buy, sell, hold. Kirby Smart, for all he has accomplished at Georgia, was 1-5 against Nick Saban and may have been a couple of wide receiver injuries away from being 0-6. Buy, sell, hold. The Georgia versus Alabama game is bigger for Kirby to show who is the dominant SEC program going forward.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, look, if John Mechie doesn't get hurt against Georgia, or I mean, if Jamison Williams doesn't get hurt against Georgia in the national title game, John Mechie already got hurt in the SEC. I mean, they beat Georgia's behind in the SEC title game. That year. So I mean, Kirby Smart's not in the same universe as Nick Saban. I mean, head to head, as he mentioned, he couldn't beat him, except for a depleted Alabama team. So to your point, it is huge. It is huge for Georgia to come out this season and take control of that rivalry. At least to the degree where they have a winning record against Bama. Like, it would be unfair for me to say Kirby Smart needs to dominate Georgia or Alabama. Nobody's going to dominate Alabama. Alabama, I don't think is going to be quite as good as they were in Nick Saban during his early tenure. But, I mean, Vince, from 2018 to 2023, Bama only won one title and only played for the title twice. You know what I mean? So they weren't as dominant as they were before. They were already kind of, and so he's going to have a winning record. And this game this year is huge because can you imagine the recruiting cachet he's going to allow Kalen DeBoer to get if he loses to Kalen DeBoer in their first year and they play at Bama? That's a must win for Georgia, not just for playoff positioning, but dude. Bama's rolling right now on a recruiting trail. Rolling. And if Kalen DeBoer messes around and goes out there and hangs 40 points a game this year and that with his offense, and they beat Georgia, life's going to get a little tough for Kirby. And here's the thing. Right now, Georgia fans are ignoring all the crap going on off the field with Kirby. Go drop your first couple games against Kalen DeBoer and see if there's, all of a sudden – the memories of Bama fans and boosters about all the off the field stuff all of a sudden becomes like, well, maybe we have a problem with that now that you're getting your butt kicked. And they've got Bama on the schedule each of the next 2 years, Vince, on the road this year, at home next year. It's going to get really interesting, really interesting. So I'm buying that. I'm buying that big time. Big time.
I definitely buy the top part. I mean, I know it wasn't really part of it, but he's absolutely 0-6 if the injuries don't occur. Do you remember when that injury occurred? Like the total complexion of the game changed.
They were right up down the field.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Injuries cost Saban a title and gave Saban a title. So at the end of the day, it's a balancing act. He would have beat Kirby in 2021, but he would have lost to Texas in 2009 if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt. I'll take that to my grave. So that for Saban's legacy, it balances each other out. But for the purposes of this, Vince, Jamison Williams had just caught a seam route for a big play. I mean, they were rolling up and down the field.
Oh my gosh, they couldn't be stopped.
Yeah.
Could not be stopped.
It looked a lot like how the SEC game went until Jamison got hurt. And then they couldn't, I mean, the receivers couldn't do it.
Because then they could just focus on the box and then it was over. I mean,
yeah. So that's going to be interesting. Because and Christopher Crosby followed up in the chat, Vince. He goes, he says, that's my point. It now becomes about not being able to beat Bama, not Saban. And that's a great point. It's now you couldn't beat your mentor. You couldn't beat the guy that taught you everything. Because you know how it is, the master always has a couple tricks up his sleeve. Sure. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you ever see the movie Red with Bruce Willis?
I don't think so.
It's really funny, but there's a scene where he's fighting this CIA agent in his office. And he's like, did Kordeski train you? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I trained Kordeski. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm still the master. I still have some things up my sleeve that you don't have.
Right.
So you could kind of say that. But if he loses to Kalen DeBoer, to Chris's point, it's now about Bama, not Saban. And that's huge. And that's the other thing. And somebody in the chat just mentioned it. This is an interesting year for Kirby because right now he's considered the king of the league.
Oh, 100%.
They got to play at Bama, at Texas, and at Ole Miss. They could win all three. They could lose all three.
Sure.
If you go out and lose 2 of those 3 games, especially if it's to the 2 new coaches, all of a sudden it's like you don't run things around here anymore. You know what I mean? Like you never really did. You know, your daddy let you win one.
Hope you enjoyed the off season.
Like, yeah, your daddy let you win one, but he made sure he gave you an L on his way out the door. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to be it's very interesting. If they lose to Texas and Alabama, the 2 new coaches, how does the narrative change? It's going to be very interesting, my friend. That's a great one, Chris. I love it.
Did you see Nick Saban at the SEC Media Days? Because he's like an analyst for all of this stuff. He just looks salty, man. Like he did not want to be there. He did not enjoy.
He doesn't want to be giving all those opinions about the SEC because exactly what's going to happen. He gave his honest opinion. He doesn't think Bama's a playoff team. And then one of his former players, I don't care about what a guy says who's out there playing golf all the time. Like that's why he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he was sitting there with his arms folded, like he
that's just
did
who
not.
Saban is anyway.
I know, but like he, like you read body language, like he did not want to be there at all.
Yeah,
it was funny.
Yep, absolutely.
I am Tenzin buy, sell, hold. We will have a 4-loss conference champion with an auto buy in the near future. This will make them change the rule back to 4 best get buys regardless of conference championship status.
I'm selling that because he's talking about the Power 4 teams.
Yeah. Yep.
I could see a 4-loss team getting in, but it would eventually be like a group of 5 somehow. But I'm selling this because I think number one, I think there's a little disrespect to the ACC and the Big 12 because he's probably not thinking the SEC is a gauntlet or the Big 10's a gauntlet and their title team has 4 losses. He's thinking Big 12 or ACC.
Right.
With all due respect, Big 12 has some really good football teams in it. I mean, let's not forget a Big 12 team literally beat Michigan 2 years ago. I mean, like Sark's a top 5 coach now. I'm like, Sonny Dykes has a same exact record in the last 3 years at TCU that Texas has. He's got a winning record against Texas. Oh, and by the way, Sonny Dykes actually won a playoff game. Something Steve Sarkisian did not do. Right? We don't have him in the top 10. Right? Because it's what have you done? Oh, he went 5-7 last year. Yeah, Sark has a 5-7 year at Texas under his belt as well. But a Big 12 team won a playoff game 2 years ago, guys. That's still in the Big 12. TCU has more college football playoff wins than Texas and Oklahoma combined. Right? So let's not act like this league sucks. Utah is a very good football team that has beaten some of these teams that people are talking about. You know, almost beat Ohio State 2 years ago with a completely their depth chart on defense was so ripped up that a running back scores a touchdown and the next series he's playing corner against Jackson Smith and Jigba and and those guys. It's like, yeah, you wonder why Jackson went have for 300 yards in that game.
Yeah,
it's exactly. Running backs guarding him.
Right.
I'm being hyperbolic. He's also an excellent player. And then you look at the ACC, and as of right now, it's still Clemson and Florida State. And if those 2 teams leave, okay, well then Miami will start running it. Miami will dominate that league if Clemson and Florida State leave because they'll just be so much more talented than everybody else. And guys, Jeff Brom is no bum. If those 2 teams leave, then Louisville just becomes that much better. And Louisville's a team, and Miami are 2 teams spending money in the NIL world to buy players. So no, those teams aren't going to lose 4 games and be in a college football play. It's just not going to happen. Somebody will beat one of those teams up, but the Big 12 especially is going to be very deep. And if they add Clemson and Florida State, which may happen, then obviously the Big 12 becomes even better. Then you ask what happens to the ACC. Do they add anybody? But again, Miami's going to step right into that void. Louisville's going to step right into that void, and the league will be fine. As far as not having a 4-loss conference champ. And here's the thing is if one of the Power 4s loses 4 games, then they'll just be the 5th highest ranked team. And the group of 5 champ will – because the Group of 5 conference champ can be ranked in the top 4, folks. Let's not forget that. So if the ACC team loses 4 games and Memphis is 11-2, then Memphis is the 4 seed, and that 4-loss team is the 12 seed, and nobody cares.
That's a good point.
So there are 5 automatic bids. We keep forgetting that, and you're not going to see an AAC team win the AAC with 4 losses. I don't think you're going to see that unless those teams, Memphis gets rated, but I just don't think you're going to see that, in my opinion. So I'm selling that.
D-Troll Hunter, buy, sell, hold. Brian Kelly riding a mechanical bull in a cowboy hat is hilarious.
It's not hilarious. I'm selling that. It's just
sad.
It's sad. It's just
sad. I don't know. I just feel like they're like,
he's having fun with it. I mean, but it's just, dude, stop trying so hard to be cool.
That's it right there. He's trying so hard to be cool. And those are the kind of people that I detest. It's like, don't just be yourself, man. Be yourself. Get your picture taken with a cowboy hat on the golf course.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just be yourself. I mean, I don't know. I just have a problem with that in general. And then he's just the king of that. So, yeah. It was hilarious, though, because he's just trying so hard. Anyway, buy, sell, hold. Washington State and Oregon State keeping bowl tie-ins through 25 indicates they have a desire to survive as a conference.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I'm major buy. I mean, they're fighting hard. Now, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but that's what all the lawsuits about keeping all the money. Like, they gave some of those teams some money out the door, but they kept a large chunk of that money because they want to be able to use that to get more teams into the league and eventually build the Pac-12 back up. That's the ultimate goal. Will that happen? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I mean, honestly, if you're the Pac-2 as well, you're also keeping a really close eye on what's happening in the ACC.
Oh, sure.
Really close eye. Because if the ACC implodes, you're like, hey, Cal, Stanford, we'd love to have you back.
Come on,
hey, SMU, we'd love to have you back. And then now you got 5 teams, and now it's like, okay, let's go get Fresno, let's go get San Diego State, let's go get Boise, and now, so yeah, I
return of the Pac-8, baby.
I don't know if it'll work.
Yeah,
but I definitely believe that to your point, it shows the desire for it to work. No question.
Well,
I don't know if it'll work or not yet.
If Florida State gets their way and they get out of the ACC and they don't have a home because nobody wants them, then maybe the Pac picks them up.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It was the article that was written by Brett McMurphy, and I'm usually not a fan of his, but he had quotes from like people. He's like, "Why would we want Florida State in our league? Like, number one, they don't bring value financially,
correct, and
they've been a bad partner to the ACC, a very bad partner to the. Why do we want to bring that headache into our league?
Could not agree more.
So Florida State thinks and Clemson thinks that they're desired because of how good they are in football. The fact that they think that they're going to be coveted because of their sports programs shows me why those schools struggle, because they have yet to figure out what's the true driver of all of this,
right?
Which is TV money, and nobody cares. Tallahassee, Florida is just not. It's not. I mean, there's a reason that Virginia and North Carolina and Miami, or especially North Carolina and Virginia, are far more coveted by these leagues than Florida State or Clemson. The Big Ten does not need the presence of Florida State and Clemson to be respected as a league. They don't need that football strength to be They want the money. They want the TV. They already have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, Oregon, Washington, Nebraska. They don't need another good program. The SEC just got Texas and Oklahoma. They've got Bama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M. They don't need you. They think it's about, well, we're really good football teams. Nobody cares. Right. That's not what this is about. And they're going to find themselves like, if the Big Ten and SEC were to go get other schools, they're going to be shocked to find out, like, we tore the ACC down. Why the heck is the SEC going after Virginia and North Carolina? We don't understand that, because they bring more value, dollars and cents, than you do. So it's very interesting. But sometimes it's be careful what you wish for, Vince, because you may find yourself saying, "Hey, Pac-12, can we partner up?" I mean, it's going to be fascinating, dude. It's going to be and wouldn't it be hilarious if Florida State was forced to go independent?
Oh my gosh.
I still think there's some element to where the Florida State wouldn't mind if the ACC contract gets blown up and then the ACC reforms and gets a new deal.
Right.
I do think there's something to that.
Yeah.
To be considered there.
I could see that too.
But then the way they're going about it is wrong.
It's horrible. Right. It's horrible.
And if that was their end game, then I think the ACC would be putting up less of a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes that. Wow. That is a roundabout way to get what you want, I guess. Interesting.
Yep. Some people still just don't understand. If you think, oh, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not going to let them distract me again. Let's roll.
Buy, sell, hold. Jalen Milroe will be a top 3 finisher in Heisman Trophy voting. It's possible.
Top 3. I'm going to buy that.
I'm going to hold on it. Because it just depends on how well Alabama does. I don't know if he's got enough juice.
I think Bama's going to be really good. I think they're going to be 10-2, and I think he's going to put up a lot of numbers. I think this notion that Alabama doesn't have good receivers is misguided. They don't have elite receivers like they used to. They still have good players there. They just don't have wow, you really have 4 first-round draft picks on your receiving core. Like, they're still pretty good, though. Like, I mean, solid, really solid. And they have really good running backs. So I think they'll be fine. And again, it's basically most of the same receivers they had last year. And he finished 6th. And this is going to be a much more explosive, high-octane offense than it was last year, just by nature.
Buy, sell, hold. Xavier Watts wins back-to-back Nagurski Awards.
Sell. I mean, look, he could be I think Xavier's going to be a much better player than he was last year. I do not see him repeating the 7 interceptions again. I just don't think teams are going to throw at him.
Yeah.
I don't see how. I don't see he's going to, because his winning that award was the 7 picks. That was what it was about, right? And doing them in primetime games.
Mm-hmm.
Teams are going to throw at him like that in those moments now. Like they're going to avoid him. So, and as the defending champ, right? As we always say, you're under much more scrutiny now. Now that all eyes are on you, you're under much more scrutiny.
They just don't like giving awards back to back to people.
Sure.
That's also part of it. You know what I mean?
Agree.
But I agree with your analytic approach, because I don't think he's going to have the stats that he's going to have, that he had last year. But he is going to have
the stats that matter to them. Like, I can see him having more tackles, more breakups, but the interception's the big one.
Yeah, he'll still be incredibly impactful on this defense.
I think he'll be a better player this year.
Yeah,
than he was last year.
Buy, sell, hold. Michigan finishes outside the top 4 in the Big Ten.
I think I had them outside the top 4, correct? I had Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and I think who was my other team?
I had them in the top 4, but I could see them being outside the top 4 when it's all said and done. I mean, I could see it for sure. That's not. I'm
trying to remember who my 4th team in that league was. I believe I think I had USC ahead of them as well, just because of USC's schedule in the league. Because again, I have USC losing 4 games this year, but 2 of them are non-conference. So I believe I had USC ahead of them. So yeah, I have them outside top 4. Definitely think they finished behind Ohio State. Definitely think they finished behind Oregon. I definitely think they finished behind Penn State, and I think they finished behind USC in the league.
I'll buy it just from spite, but I don't. I mean, they're going to take a step back.
Their schedule's also tough too. I mean, they got to play at Washington, at Illinois, at Ohio State. They get USC at home. They get Oregon at home. I mean, I have Michigan losing 3 games in the league and beating Oregon. So if I'm wrong and they don't get upset by Illinois, then they lose at home to Oregon. They'll lose one of them, so that's kind of where I'm at.
Final one on this sheet. Buy, sell, hold. Tennessee makes the playoff and Ole Miss does not.
I'm selling that because I don't think either one of them are going to make the playoff. I still think Ole Miss has a better shot at it. And look, I know that Ole Miss has a history of inconsistency under Lane Kiffin, and he was that same way at Florida Atlantic. He was the same way at Michigan. But I still think that, and I think I like Tennessee as a team. I think they're going to be better this year than they were last year. Still don't think they're a playoff team. So I don't have any of them on there, and I think Ole Miss is probably has the better shot of being a playoff team than does Tennessee. I just don't see either one of them as playoff teams, and Tennessee's schedule is not easy either. They have NC State in a neutral field. They got to play at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, they got to play at Georgia, and then they get Bama at home, Florida at home. Like it's to me, it's going to be a little too tough for them to be a playoff.
I don't think you got the right schedule in front of you.
Looking at Tennessee 2024.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Ole Miss.
No,
you said Tennessee. Ole Miss's schedule is not very hard. Okay,
I meant to say Tennessee.
Gotcha.
Ole Miss's schedule is a little. Well, actually, I think Tennessee's schedule, they got to play Bama at home and at Georgia. Ole Miss doesn't have I just don't think Ole Miss schedule is as tough as maybe some people are making it out to be. Just my personal opinion. I know they got to play at LSU, and I know they got to play Georgia at home, but they don't play Bama. They don't play Tennessee. Tennessee doesn't play them. They get Oklahoma at home. They get Georgia at home. They get Kentucky at home. And then their only really tough road game in the league as far as a team that has a chance to beat them is at LSU.
Correct.
So I don't think that's
which I think that's part of the reason why in this particular scenario I would take Ole Miss over Tennessee because of the schedule.
Yeah, and I don't know that either of them are going to make the playoff, but
sure.
If one of them does, I feel a lot better about
Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Yep.
Okay, another one from D Troll Hunter. Buy, sell, hold. Nebraska is unfairly already at a pivotal year in Matt Rule's rebuild efforts because of conference realignment. It will be, let's see, he's got a parentheses here. It will be harder than ever to break through, and they will have, and they have a fairly favorable schedule this year.
I think that's very fair. I mean, look, I think I buy that because I think he's saying unfairly because year 2 shouldn't be considered that important. But you've just welcomed 4 new teams in the league. You already have the issues of recruiting at Nebraska that you already have, the perception-wise and all that. And you were handed a pretty favorable schedule. I honestly thought that the Big Ten was going to just destroy Nebraska this year because they're still all pissed off about Nebraska suing them to play in 2020 and all that other kind of stuff. And then you look at their schedule last year, was it 2 years ago? I think they handed them just this absolutely insane schedule 2 years. I think it was 2 years ago, right? And so it's I just thought they were going to get handed a really brutal schedule this year, and they really didn't, Vince. I mean, it's not a cakewalk, but they get Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana, UCLA, Wisconsin, and Iowa, right? Those are not easy. And then they get at USC and at Ohio State. They don't get Michigan. They don't get Penn State. They don't get Oregon. They don't get Washington. So they got some of the top teams, but they don't have just a gauntlet of a schedule the way that they've had in past years. So I think Nebraska has a shot to be good this year. I mean, they got a 5-star freshman quarterback. But the problem is I wonder if expectations are a little too high for Nebraska. And they could win 9-10 games, but that's asking a lot. That is, it's not a gauntlet schedule, but it's not easy either, Vince. And I don't care how good, even if Dylan Raiola is as good as the recruiting services say he was, top 5 player, number 1 quarterback and all that, he's still a true freshman. Mm-hmm. And he's not like where Trevor Lawrence, who had T. Higgins and Justin Ross and Travis Etienne and 5 veteran offensive linemen and the best defense in college football on his team. You're going to have this kid win more games for you than what you asked Trevor Lawrence to. I mean, Trevor Lawrence didn't really start carrying Clemson until the playoffs. I mean, if you really think about it. And so I just, yeah. And if they don't take a jump this year, then I think they could fall behind real fast.
You don't think they're going to get rid of them after 2 years, do you?
No, it's not about getting rid of them. It's more about you're just going to be behind and it's just going to be impossible to dig out of that hole. And you just become kind of a relatively irrelevant program. Gotcha. It's harder to recruit. It's harder to do this. They have a window here, in my opinion, that if they can win 8+ games with a true freshman quarterback and look somewhat good doing it,
yeah,
it's going to make it. You build on. I don't think they got to go 9-10 wins. They got to go 8-4 and win a bowl game. If they do that, Vince, to me, with a true freshman quarterback, that gives them a little bit of cachet to go on the recruiting trail and say, hey, this is why you need to come here. Because, look, we're turning this thing around. Dylan's got 2 more years left. We're going to get this thing going. And then all of a sudden it becomes a lead to recruit. But you go 6-6 this year, and all of a sudden you just get passed by, in my opinion. And that's the concern. And I think he nails that.
Frank G. Buy, sell, hold. Multiple coaches on Notre Dame will be named head coaches at other programs after this season.
I'll buy that because I think Notre Dame's going to make a playoff run, and I could see a Dylan McCullough. Between Dylan McCullough, I mean, there's plenty of candidates. Not Gino. Deland, maybe Joe Rudolph, Al Washington, Al Golden, even Mike Mickens. It's possible. So I'll buy it as a possibility. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I'll buy it as a possibility.
I'll sell it because I don't think you will have multiple head coaches. I think you'll get one, whoever that happens to be. I think you'll get one. I don't think you'll get multiple. So buy, sell, hold.
Hope you're right.
Yeah,
I don't want to lose a bunch of coaches.
I think maybe I'm just being hopeful.
I mean, because you had Jared Parker get taken by Troy. I mean, it's not
That's
Power
true.
5 schools. I mean, it
doesn't say that.
Look, if Notre Dame's, dude, Audri Denson got a head coaching job.
Fair.
Charlie Molnar got a head coaching job. So, yeah. If he were to say at Power 5 schools, I'd be like, sell.
Yeah, right.
But he just said head coaching jobs.
Buy, sell, hold. Wide receiver recruiting will reach its potential before Viper recruiting.
Buy. I'm not super comfortable about that, but buy.
I think wide receiver recruiting will be easier to do because of the success that the offense is about to have.
And I think it's easier to find good receivers than it is guys that fit that very unique what they're looking for at Viper. It's a very unique position.
Right.
That honestly, you're going to see more linebackers, probably guys that are sort of like, I mean, Logan Thomas has the frame of an edge. So we all view it as, but he played linebacker most of his career in high school and was a stand-up edge rusher in his last year. And so it's a very unique position that can be hard to recruit to. So it's not even saying like, I think Mike Brown's going to do a better job than Al Washington. I just think it's
right.
And those guys that are just those really twitchy, proven edge rushers that are going to make everyone feel excited about them coming in costs a lot of money to get. And they tend to want to stay in the South. It's just the reality of it.
Buy, sell, hold. Mike Mickens will replace Al Golden as D coordinator after Golden leaves.
I hope that's a buy.
Yeah, that's a buy for me out of just absolute hope.
Yeah.
That's how I want it to go.
Yep. I'm with you.
In Vince's perfect world, that is the succession plan.
I am with you. I don't want either of them to leave anytime soon.
No, me neither. Believe me. No, me neither. But yeah, if it happens, that's what I want to happen. All right. Buy, sell, hold from a Texas Sam. With the playoffs expanding and thus more postseason wins needed to get a championship, it's more important than ever for teams to be able to be multiple when it comes to their schemes. The odds of getting a bad matchup are higher, and so rosters that have the depth to be able to adjust are even more at a premium moving forward.
Agree completely. 100% agree with that. I mean, like that's partly why NFL teams are so multiple, because you never know what type of offense you're going to face from one week to the next. And so, 1 week you're facing Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and the next week you're facing Derrick Henry. And you just got to, and I would say there's even way more diversity of scheme in college than even there is in the NFL. And so, like, if you're a team in the SEC, Vince, you have to recruit to beat your league. You may only have to have one big win out of conference because a lot of times SEC teams are beating each other in the championship game. So you just got to win a semifinal game. I mean, listen, Alabama and Georgia have played each other twice for the national title in 10 years. I mean, so there was 2 years where two SEC teams squared off for a championship game. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot to that. Absolutely a lot to that, Vince, of you've got to, 1 week you got to play Oregon. The next week you got to play Georgia. The next week you got to play Notre Dame. The next week, what I mean? There's a lot more diversity, potential diversity for what you have to face on a week-to-week basis. Yes, you got to be more multiple, 100%. Like Nick Saban today, and he knew this, that's why he changed. Nick Saban today couldn't win a championship the way he did in 09 and 11 to 12.
That's why
he changed. 3-4. Yeah, exactly. You're just a 3-4 power defense. We're better than everybody else. Because now, I mean, it happened. Why? Because he was losing games. He lost to A&M in 2012. They lost back-to-back games to Ole Miss, and I think it was like 13-14 or 14-15, one of those 2 years. It was all because these teams are these spread air raid type of systems where you're getting these athletic quarterbacks in space, and and it's much more of a space game on defense. And so you just couldn't line up with your 7 big boys on the field and like you could before. The game changed, and he's the reason the game changed. And we got to figure out a way to beat them. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. We got to be different than them, and then you evolve. So I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point, Sam. I buy the heck out of that.
I read this completely differently, Brian. I read this from an offensive standpoint, that you need to be multiple offensively in order to compete.
Same. I mean, it's also true there. It's also true there because one week you're going to face a team that's got a great front four. The next week you're going to face a team that's got a great secondary.
That doesn't mean you're multiple different ways. That doesn't mean you have your multiple scheme. Like,
I think it does. Yeah.
Really?
Because again, what are you talking about when it seems multiple schemes? It doesn't mean you're running air raid one play and the triple option the next.
See, that's what I think about scheme.
No, I don't think so. No, I think you've got to be able to, like, one week we're really ripping you up with some horizontal stretch stuff and screen game. The next week they can take that stuff away. We've got to do a lot more vertical stretch type stuff and concepts.
But that's all within your scheme, though. That's all within your.
No, but those are different schemes within your offense. Like, you have an offensive structure and you have different schemes that are part of the offensive structure. You know what I mean? So, like, I think
I see what you're saying. That's
not like we're air raid,
right? That's not the terminology
I think, like,
use.
To me, a smash that's a scheme. It's a concept, right?
It's a concept, not a scheme,
right? But it's a scheme. It's a high-low scheme, right? It's a way to attack the defense, and so it's like no different than one week we got to be more too high on defense, and next week you got to be 4-2-5. 1 week we're gonna have to come out and we're gonna have to do a lot more 12 personnel this week just to match up. The next week we may do more 11 personnel. I think those all things are scheme, and so either side of the ball, I think that's still true. Because like he's saying, the odds of getting a bad matchup are higher. Well, 1 week you're coming out and we're running our inside-outside zone and we're ripping this team up, and the next week we're playing a team like Clemson 2018 D-line, and we just can't line up and run inside zone all the time. So what do we got to do? We got to mix up our schemes, right? This week we got to run a little bit more buck sweep. We got to get some pin and pull. As counters, we got to change this, we got to do that in order to be successful, because we have to match up better against this team. And you see that in the NFL a lot, right, Vince, where from 1 week to the next, an NFL team may run completely different plays, right? Because it's just what they do. It's never going to be like that in college football, because you don't have these are guys that still have to go to class, in theory, have to go to class. But you're seeing a lot more. I mean, Notre Dame's defense is an example of that. They look very different from week to week. And I think the good offenses are going to be similar to that as well. You always have certain things that are always going to be true that you kind of implement all the time. But the way you do them and then what you counter them with, I think has to change. You have to be good at doing multiple things to win championships at this level on both sides of the ball, my opinion. So I'll buy it. Vince sells it. And I think it's a terminology.
It's a terminology. I get what you're saying completely. And I agree with the concept. I disagree with the terminology.
Yeah.
There you go. That's where we're at.
I love it. Chris, I like it when you disagree, Vince.
I'm adamant about this one too. Yeah. No, anyway. Chris Y, buy, sell, hold. We see a true freshman step up and not only force themselves into the starting lineup, but also make impact plays on either offense or defense. A true freshman in this starting lineup is the key to this thing.
I think I'm going to sell that for now, but my opinion might change by the end of fall camp when we get a chance to see Gerby Lambert. Because he's the only one, like there's 3 guys that could potentially be that without – because, like, again, he says force their way. So this isn't, somebody goes down and Leonard Moore steps in at corner and he does
not an injury.
It's forces their way. And I like the way that he was – you guys are getting so good at being very specific with this type of stuff, which I think makes for even better questions or better submissions and hopefully better answers. But, Kingston could, Bryce Young could, and Gerby Lambert could. So I'm actually going to change my answer, Vince. I just feel like between those 3 guys, there's at least a chance that one of them forces their way into the starting lineup. Now, the other thing is, I actually think I'm more comfortable buying your second part, making impact plays. I think you'll definitely see that from the freshman class.
Completely agree with that.
Whether or not it'll be like Kingston's going to make impact plays this year. Bryce Young's going to make impact plays this year. I have no doubt about that.
Agreed.
I think Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams, one of those two, could make impact plays this year. I could see Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert or Logan Saldate making impact plays this year. Will they do that as starters? That's what I don't see as much. So, but so I just don't see those guys force. Like, I love Cam Williams. I don't see him forcing his way in the starting lineup this year. They're just too good and they're too experienced ahead of him. Like, and it's not because these guys aren't good. 3 years ago, Cam Williams is playing day one. There's not even a discussion. 2 years ago.
Right.
Actually, Vince, a year ago. That's true. This year, it's a different animal. Like, I don't think Notre Dame fans have wrapped their heads around what this receiving core is built now. Like, it's nothing like last. It's not, when I say nothing like last year's, I'm not even saying like guys have gotten better. It's a literally a completely different looking receiving core than it was last year. Just completely different looking. And so it's just going to be a lot harder to crack the starting lineup because of how well they've recruited in previous years at certain positions. But buy that they'll make an impact, sell for now that they're going to force themselves in the starting lineup.
Yeah,
but I sell with hesitancy because of just how good Gerby Lambert, Bryce Young, and Kingston Viliama-Asa are. That's really what it comes down to for me.
I'm much more on the sell with certainty side of things on that part. I buy this last part, no doubt about it. But
I think Gerby Lambert steps on the field the day he shows up at Notre Dame, and he's by far the most talented right tackle on the roster.
He's the only one I could see potentially starting.
Right.
He's the only one. The other two, I don't. I'm sorry. Don't.
I know why you're so vociferously doing this, because of how annoyed you are with the constant let's dismiss Drake Bowen kind of thing. But let's just say hypothetically, Vince, the rover position struggles. Kingston's playing very well. You don't think it's possible that Notre Dame may say, hey, we got to move Jack back out the rover because we're not getting good play there and we're going to start Kingston at will? You don't think that's a possibility?
Is he cross-training at that position? Because I was under the impression he was only doing Mike.
No. There was plays in the Jersey scrimmage where him and Drake were on the field together.
Gotcha.
I've talked about that. It was him, and then Jaden was at rover. Jaden Osborne was at rover, and it was Drake at Mike and Kingston at will. So he is playing both. They always cross-train everybody. Until you get locked into the starting lineup, you cross-train, basically. So now, and you say, well, that's not forcing his way. It is, because you're only making that move of Jack to rover because of how confident you are that Kingston can step in at will and start. See what I'm saying? So it's not just about he beats Drake out. And again, with Bryce Young, you don't think there's a scenario where him, Burnham, and Oben are all playing so well that one of those guys moves to Viper, and then eventually Bryce is just like he's 6'7", 250, and he's a freaky athlete. Like, so I'm selling with you. I just think the talent of those three players is such that I can't with confidence say that they won't force themselves onto the field. I'm not there yet, but it's something to at least be thinking about, in my opinion. But I understand where you're coming from, because I know the frustration you rightly have about people just dismissing the veterans for the freshmen. I get that, but I still don't think we should then change or, maybe kind of push back on how good the freshmen are because we're annoyed by fans. That's all I would say.
I understand where you're coming from. I'm still sitting where I'm at. Kenny Minchie.
And I said I know why. I'm not trying to change. I'm sympathetic to it.
Yeah. I don't see Bryce Young skipping over two guys to get a start.
What I'm saying is he may only have to skip over one. That's the thing I'm positing to you, is there's a chance that because they're so good there, and that's forcing your way, he's so good there that you now are more comfortable saying, hey, we're going to move RJ over to Viper.
See, I'm moving Josh to Viper already. I'm already moving Josh to Viper. I talked about that on the show.
Sure. And earlier. So now he's not passing over two guys.
I just don't
he's
see
only
him
got
being
to pass
able
over one
to get over the veteran Oben.
Again, that's why I'm selling.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's something that we should dismiss, because he's still an elite level talent.
Oh, sure. He's going to get a ton of playing time, and he is going to make impact plays. I just don't know that he technically will be the starter.
Sure.
I don't think they take that away from him.
And again, I don't either now, so I'm selling. I'm not doing it with the confidence that you are.
Yep, still confident. All right, next one. Buy, sell, hold. Kenny Minchie will beat out both CJ Carr and Steve Angeli to be the backup quarterback, and fits into Mike Denbrock's offense better.
I'm selling it. And honestly, if you would have left out the caveat of the last one, I might have bought it. Maybe. But I just think CJ Carr is actually the better fit into the system. And I think the reason people think that is because they think Kenny's the better athlete, and I don't necessarily agree that he's the better runner.
Right.
And I also don't think that, again, we saw him scramble in the bowl.
People think Kenny is a dual threat quarterback, and that's not his game. That's not his game.
Agree. But I also don't think he beats them both out. I wouldn't be upset if he does. I
wouldn't either.
But I think CJ Carr's he's just different.
I'll sell that too. Buy, sell, hold, Hayden 32. Notre Dame is going to go 0-3 more than likely with the known wide receivers due to pay-for-play offers.
Sell, because one of them, they may go 0-3. I'm not ready to completely close that book. I've told you guys my feelings on the Derek Meadows situation. Notre Dame has not been his leader for a while, but they're still battling, and as long as this staff is battling, I give them a shot, even though I don't, as from what I was told as of yesterday, they're still trailing. But they're still fighting, and that's the key. But one of the three, they're not losing for pay-for-play because Dylan Robinson's not going to Washington because of money. Give Washington credit. They did their pitch for how they view him is just more of what he wanted to hear than Notre Dame's. Notre Dame was honest. We want you to be a receiver. His pitch at Washington was, well, you got to play both ways. And, and he just decided he wants to play defense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Along those same lines, from Poe Welch 84, buy, sell, hold, Notre Dame will flip a top 50 to 100 wide receiver in the 25 class by the early signing day.
I'll sell that. I think they're going to go out and get some receivers. I don't know if they'll flip a guy. Now, part of me, because I don't want to, I'm not really commenting on Derek Meadows yet because I just want to see what he does on Saturday.
Fair.
If he picks Notre Dame on Saturday, then they're not going to flip a top 50 receiver. If he picks LSU on Saturday,
then they got a chance.
Then exactly.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I mean, look, right now my opinion has not changed. People that are on the board know the intel piece I put up yesterday. My sources still believe LSU's the leader. It's just that they're fighting, they're closing the gap, and they're hoping that they can do it. But the whole thing all along is, look, we don't care who he picks on Saturday. We're recruiting this kid like crazy until signing day.
Yeah.
And that's the plan.
Yep. Lucky 905, buy, sell, hold. Ben Morrison will run a 4.47 at the NFL Combine.
I mean, that's pretty specific.
That's a very specific number.
Buy, I guess. I mean, I think he's a high 4.4 most likely after some training.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe low 4.5.
Very specific number.
I mean, sub 4.5 I'd have bought, but 4.4. I mean, if he runs a 4.45, it's like, so okay, I was wrong. I don't think he's a mid 4.4 guy, at least not right now. I think he's more of a high 4.4, low 4.5 guy. But after some training, sure, I'll buy.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
It's going to be – I need to write this down someplace because it's going to be hilarious if he runs that exact number.
Lucky 905 is getting a free annual subscription if he runs a 4.47 at the Combine.
I thought that is such a specific number. Anyway, all right, Domer Grizz, buy, sell, hold, Howard Cross, and Riley Mills are their steady selves, but one of the younger defensive linemen outshines them this year.
Sell.
Yeah, it's a sell for me too. There will be other young defensive linemen that will be good and they will make plays, but they will not get outshined.
Not both of them.
No.
So.
Missed Emil Wagner.
I love that name, by the way.
That's awesome. Buy, sell, hold. Brady Hart will have a bigger impact, i.e. stats and hype for Michigan than Noah Grubbs at Notre Dame, but Noah will have significantly better teams.
I'm selling the heck out of this for two reasons. Number one is we're assuming with this question that Brady Hart and Noah Grubbs are both going to be starters. If they're both because otherwise, how can Noah be part of significantly better teams? If they're both starters, Mike Denbrock's offense is far more quarterback friendly than the one at Michigan. So if Noah's starting at Notre Dame, he will have better numbers than Brady Hart. If Notre Dame's teams are better than Michigan's teams, he will also have more hype than Brady Hart. So I'm selling that all the way around.
I like
all
it.
the way around. Now, I'm not saying that Noah definitely will have better stats than Brady. I'm saying if they're both starters, that's the premise we're looking at here, then Noah Grubbs will have better numbers and more hype.
Yeah.
Just because he'll be part of a better team and a system. And even if Michigan's as good as Notre Dame as a team, it's still going to be a team that's more built on running the football, playing defense, and Notre Dame will be more of an open up, throw the ball down the field type of system. So I'm selling.
Another one from Mr. Emil Wagner. Buy, sell, hold. The best way to help wide receiver recruiting is for Riley Leonard to be more of a traditional quarterback rather than a playmaker in order to show wide receiver recruits that they can prosper in South Bend. But that may not be the best for Notre Dame this year.
Sell that harshly. I mean, we're not talking about Riley Leonard being a guy that's going to rush for 1,000 yards and throw for 2,200 yards. I mean, Riley Leonard's still a guy that can go out there and run for 700-800 yards and throw for over 3,000 on a team at Notre Dame. So, no, I would say that the way that you said it, I sell. If you were to say, it'd be better for them recruiting if Riley Leonard makes more plays in the pass game this year than he did maybe at Duke, sure, there's some merit to that. But if Riley Leonard is putting up the same, I mean, guys, look, Alabama just got a commitment from a 5-star wide receiver, and Riley Leonard's bet numbers are, and they have a dual threat quarterback. I mean, the guy that they just went and got from Texas is a dual threat quarterback. Keelan Russell's a dual threat quarterback. So the problem isn't that Notre Dame hasn't had playmakers or quarterbacks. Notre Dame hasn't been throwing the football. And those two things aren't exclusive of each other.
Yeah.
You can be a playmaker quarterback and still throw for a mess of yards. You can be both, and that's what they want, right? That's what's best for Notre Dame. And here's the other thing. What's best for receiver recruiting is to go out and win a championship.
Exactly.
And the best way to win a championship is to let Riley Leonard be himself. That's the best way.
Agreed. Buy, sell, hold. With the portal covering up a multitude of sins, wide receiver recruiting this year will not have the major negative effect as it would pre-portal.
I'm buying the heck out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is 100% spot on.
Yes. And you can insert any position in there because, as Notre Dame is going to try to be a high school recruiting program, they always will be that under Marcus Freeman. I totally believe that. But you can have some misses and still fill in the gaps with the portal. That's what the portal is supposed to be for, not the way that it's being used by some other teams.
Sure.
But it's used to kind of fill in the gaps. I mean, it just is. And you can miss and still be okay because of the portal.
Agree.
Nathan Milton, buy, sell, hold. 2 wide receivers from Notre Dame's 23 class will have 800-plus yards. 1 will have 900-plus yards next season.
So 1 will have over 9, 2 will have at least 8. So that would be Jordan Faison and KK Smith and Jaden Greathouse. I'm selling that.
Well, I think he's saying 2 are going to have over 800, and then one of those 2 will be over 9.
Yeah, right.
So that's only 2 people.
Yeah, but I'm saying of the 3 they have, the only options are Jaden Greathouse, KK
from the
Smith,
23 class.
From the 23 class.
I got you.
So those are only 3 options. So 2 of them are going to have over 800 yards, and I don't.
I don't see that happening either.
So I'm selling.
Good call. I totally missed the 23 class part, even though I just read it to you. All right. Buy, sell, hold. Nick Saban will coach again.
Sell. I mean, okay, are we saying his grandkids Pop Warner team for a year?
Right.
Nick Saban had the best job in college football for him. He's not going to leave that and coach somewhere else. No, he's 72 years old, folks. He's done coaching.
He retired for a reason.
Him and Miss Terry are going to hang out and yeah.
Yeah, he'll just be a curmudgeon on the TV set.
He's not curmudgeon. I know.
It's just who he is. No, it's just who he is. Yeah. It's all good. Buy, sell, hold. By the end of next season, Notre Dame's team culture will be set, locked in, and player led.
I hope that's a sell because I hope it's there now.
I was gonna say it's that.
And you're
way
going
now.
into year 3, dude. If you're still waiting on your culture to be set, it's a problem.
Right. I feel like it's that way now.
I'm going to sell that. If it's not set now, then it won't be set by the end of next season.
Right.
If you can't establish a culture until year 4, you've got a problem. You're not a very good football coach. So I'm selling. Buy, sell, hold during next season. Next, can we just say we're referring to next as in this upcoming, correct? Is that what what we're doing, Vince? I mean, it's just,
for us, yeah.
What it means. Okay.
I mean, we get to make that decision, right? Because Nathan's not around.
Yes, he is. He's in the chat.
Is he in the chat? Oh, okay.
Yes, but that's what we're going to assume here.
Yeah. So for the 24 season. So during the 24 season, Auburn beats Alabama.
Sell.
B, no ACC team makes the top 4 in the college football playoff.
Sell, because that means a group of 5 team is ranked ahead of them. Definitely a sell.
Huge sell for B.
And he did say yes, he is referring to 24.
Okay. B is the biggest sell here so far.
Yes.
C, Notre Dame will break at least one significant Notre Dame record. Your choice, something like most rushing yards in a season or most sacks, etc., by both the offense and the defense.
I'm going to, you know what, Vince? I'm going to buy that because I definitely think they'll do some offensive stuff. I mean, they just set the all-time scoring record last year. I won't be shocked if they beat it this year.
Right.
And defensively, especially if they make a run in the playoffs, because they're going to play 3-4 games. But even if you just look at the 13, I could see something like that. Because Notre Dame's got some records on defense that aren't overly impressive because some of the best teams Notre Dame ever had, like, you don't have to get more sacks than the year in 73 or 77 when you had Ross Browner and Willie Fry playing together. Why? Because they didn't count sacks back then. Because I would be willing to bet you one of those Willie Fry, Ross Browner's Notre Dame's all-time leading guy in sacks if they counted sacks when he played in the 70s. So like something like that would be a lot easier to do. So I'll buy both.
I'll buy it. I think that Notre Dame defense is going to be elite, and I think the Notre Dame offense has a chance to be that way. And so I'll buy it.
Yeah. Somebody said, hold, I need to see the offense. I'm like, guys, but we just saw Jared Parker,
who everybody thinks is a bum,
set a school record in points.
Right. Who everybody thinks is a bum. So if you think Mike Denbrock is better,
he just had the second best yards per play average in 50 years. The only coach that had a better year than him was Mike Denbrock. So I don't think I'm not saying it's going to be 19 LSU, but it's going to be better than what
talking about setting Notre Dame records, not NCAA records.
Exactly.
That's a different conversation.
Agreed.
All right, Rocket for Heisman, buy, sell, hold. If Minchie, Angeli, or Carr were on the 22 team, they end up in a serious battle for QB1 with Buckner, and even if he gets hurt, they come in and beat Ohio State and are the reason that we beat Marshall and Stanford, and they lead the team to the playoffs.
I'm selling that. That's some serious revisionism right there.
That's like a lot.
Some serious revisionism. I'm selling that. No, none of those guys would have. I might, maybe the second one, maybe, because I think CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli might have been good enough for you to beat Stanford. You're still not beating USC. I mean, look, Drew Pine is not the reason they lost USC. He had one bad play, but he also had a lot of really good plays in that game. You just couldn't stop their offense. So no, and none of them were beating Ohio State because none of them. Last I checked, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, and CJ Carr aren't going to line up and block, and that was the problem they had on offense in 2022.
Correct.
They couldn't block anybody.
Correct.
Yeah. So sell.
Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame ends the season with 22 interceptions.
I mean, up in the ante, right? Like last week, it was 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Remember that when we did that one last week? Sure. Sell. I mean, look, let's see him get
a lot. That's a lot.
Let's see him get the 21st.
Notre Dame ends the season with 45 sacks.
Now, it just for we're clear, in the I took these out for room, but he said 12 plus 1 is what he said. So he already established that he's not talking about if Notre Dame makes a 16-game run. He said 12 plus 13. 1. 45 sacks. That's a 14 jump over last year, 7 more than the year before. It's 4 more than what Freeman had in his. Yeah, I'll take that because I mean they've been close the last couple of years. They had 41 in Freeman's 1 year as a D coordinator, and
they should be disruptive this year. They should.
I'm gonna buy that.
Yeah, why not?
Hey, dude, we're talking about Bryce Young being their third string,
right?
Big end, yeah.
And finally, on this page from Rocket for Heisman, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame convinces Meadows to wait till October to commit, and where we are versus LSU convinces him to come to the green side.
Sell. He's not going to wait till October to commit, and Notre Dame can still convince him to come to the green side, but it would be down the road, and it won't be because they convinced him to wait now. So Vince, you got time for a couple more, and then I will finish.
Okay, yeah, a couple more. Rocket for Heisman, buy, sell, hold. The cheap holding call against Colorado when Rocket ran the kickoff back was worse than the pick play call against FSU in 2014.
Sell. Well, if worse if you're talking about magnitude of the game, but worse as far as bad call, I think that was closer to being a clip than what happened at Notre Dame was to being a pick, in my opinion. So I'm selling that.
Okay. Gorm is or. Buy, sell, hold. Riley Leonard will be Notre Dame's leader in rushing touchdowns in 24.
Sell.
No, sell. He'll be third. Bayside Tiger 6, buy, sell, hold. The offensive line will be further ahead by Texas A&M than expected, thanks to Al Golden and the ones versus ones and twos this year in fall camp.
Buy. That's a great point.
That's a really good point.
Great point.
Hadn't
Notre
really brought up.
Line was far more prepared for Georgia in 2017 because they had to face that offensive line every day.
It's a good call. It's a really good call. And Bayside Tiger 6, I appreciate this very much because I'm absolutely going to use this at some point and multiple times between now and the beginning of the season. Because it's so right. It's so true.
Great point. Yeah.
It's so true. He
didn't say they're going to be elite. He just said they're going to be further ahead.
Because people 100%. Think the offensive line is going to be like this sieve, first of all.
No.
Like that. I mean,
we have seen this group play together,
right?
And they didn't. They scored 40 points.
Yes,
in a bowl game. Yeah,
but that's what people. I mean, that's the prevailing thought: is the offensive line is not going to be very good, especially against what Texas A&M is bringing to the table. But I think, man, this is a really good call. This is a really good point, man. I appreciate this one. I'm glad I stuck around for this one.
Yeah. Yep.
Double bogey, buy, sell, hold. By the end of their careers, one of CJ Carr or Deuce Knight will beat Brady's all-time passing record.
Sell. I mean, look, Brady was a 4-year starter basically at Notre Dame. I don't think either of those guys are going to be 4-year starters. I think CJ might only be a 2-year starter because if CJ's as good as some people that I've talked to think he will be, there's already people at Notre Dame talking about he may only be a 2-year guy, meaning he's the backup. He learns this year and then he starts 5 and 26 and he's out. So as far as starters.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, I've got all my chips in on CJ Carr.
And Brady put up, I mean, Brady threw for almost 4,000 yards in 2005.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm selling that.
Buy, sell, hold. The D-line is very productive this season, leading to more interest from impact players in next year's recruiting cycle.
Buy. And they were very productive last year. I think they'll be even more productive this year. I'll buy that.
Yeah,
it's a good one. Buy that one.
Riker Ferg, buy, sell, hold. If Barry Alvarez took over Notre Dame after Lou Holtz's retirement, he would have had the program stabilized, but not reach the heights like he took the Badgers to.
Strongly disagree with that. I mean, if he's the same coach at Notre Dame as he was at Wisconsin, he'd have way better players at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And he would have been yes, I'm selling that. He would have not only stabilized it, but also won at a much higher level. Never won a title at Wisconsin.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so no, I'm not. Yeah, I know. Just I got you. Yep, you're good. Vince has got to leave for vacation, so that's he's got to go. He had a 4:00 out. Let's go to Brian G. It says Notre Dame averages 7 yards per play on first down, plays outside of the 20s. Buy that because I think they're going to be a 7 per play. I mean, they were 6.95 last year. So I think overall it'll be 7.0. And if they're 7.0 overall, then they're definitely 7.0 outside the 20s. Notre Dame has 25 first down plays over 20 yards for the season on first downs outside of the 20s. First downs, let's see how many plays of over 20 yards did they have last year? Let me pull up the old statistical analysis here. Longest scrimmage plays, 20 yards. So LSU last year had 107 plays of 20 plus yards. Notre Dame had 76. So at least a third. If you look at Notre Dame's numbers, at least a third of them would have to be on first down. I'll buy that. And then Notre Dame runs the ball on 60% of their first downs outside of the 20s. I'd say probably a little bit closer to 50-50, but I do think it'll slide towards the run game more on first down. So yeah, I'll buy that, especially because you'll have your quarterback that can do some stuff running the football, and you're going to want to stay ahead of schedule. And so, yeah, especially in the big games, I think so, even more so, especially in the big games. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. And to respond to questions, I don't believe Notre Dame made a play for Barry Alvarez. I do not believe that they did, because I was told by a lot of people over the years that he wanted that job. He definitely wanted the job. Bob Davie kissed a lot of booties. And Notre Dame didn't want Notre Dame was looking to move past the Lou Holtz era, and Barry Alvarez was considered part of the Lou Holtz era, and they did not make a run out of. But Barry would have been a great coach at Notre Dame. Floating Irish, buy, sell, hold. The quarterbacks you would want to run the offense this year. So I got to buy one, sell one, hold one. Who would I want to run the offense this year? I'm going to buy Jimmy Clausen. I'm going to hold on Sam Hartman, and I'm going to sell DeShone Kizer, because the biggest issue with DeShone Kizer is that he just did not have the maturity or leadership ability to lead a team. I think Sam Hartman in this offense with this coach and this group of skill players would have been much better than he was last year. For all the hate on Sam Hartman, and I get it, he would have been far, far more successful running Mike Denbrock's offense than whatever he played in last year. No question. And Jimmy would light it up. Jimmy would be phenomenal throwing in this offense. He would be lights out. No question about it. So, yeah, I'll go with Jimmy. Jim Haller and Matt Bayless' departure will be more evident this season by Hold. That's a good one. I'm gonna hold that one, Jim, because I just don't know a lot about Coach Landau. If I knew that if we were, let's say, they would have promoted last year's Fred Hale to full time, then I'd say yeah, we'll definitely feel it this way because I like Fred Hale. I've heard a lot of good things, but he's not Matt Bayless. Lauren Landau, I don't know. I really don't know enough about him, so I'm gonna have to hold that one. But if he's not a legit strength coach, we will know, to your point, Jim, if he's not the guy, we will know now. We will know this season. 100% agree with that part of it, Jim, for sure. The end zone by Hold. This year, Riley Leonard will be the best quarterback at Notre Dame since the start of the BK era. I'll buy that. I'll definitely buy that. I mean, they haven't had a lot of great individual seasons at quarterback, especially in big games. So I don't think that's all that hard to do, to be completely honest with you. So I'll definitely buy that. No question. John D. Irish, number 1, by Hold. If we had kept Tyler Buchner as our quarterback last year instead of acquiring Sam Hartman, our win-loss record would have been no worse than 10-3. I'm going to sell that because I don't know that Tyler Buchner could have played a whole season. And I've said this before. If you think last year was bad, imagine if they didn't have Sam Hartman as the quarterback. That would have not been good. So I'm selling that. If Buchner was Notre Dame's quarterback last year, he would have progressed enough in the passing ability that we would not have needed to get Riley Leonard this year. That I'll buy. So if Tyler Buchner if Tyler Buchner was Notre Dame's quarterback last year and would have stayed at Notre Dame, and let's assume you said he was the starting quarterback last year, which means he didn't get hurt, there would have not have been a need to go get Riley Leonard, correct? Because Tyler Buchner would have been the transition quarterback. I do buy that. Notre Dame liked Tyler Buchner a lot. They did. The concern was his inability to stay healthy, and that's really the key. He made a big mistake going to Alabama. The Tyler Buchner we saw against South Carolina was getting close to the guy that he could have been. He had to obviously cut down on some of the interceptions a little bit, but he was a playmaker in that game. I mean, a playmaker. And he ripped South Carolina up. That's who Tyler Buchner could have been on a more consistent basis. And if Notre Dame would have said, let's not go to the portal and we're going to keep Tyler and Tyler's our starter and all that, and he did stay healthy, then I believe this would be true. I just don't know that he could stay healthy because he never was. He missed games in 2021. He missed games in 2022. He just never stayed healthy. So it would be hard for that one. But if Tyler was the starter and stayed healthy, then I think that you are correct in that, and I would buy that part. Buy that. So sell the first one, buy the second one. Poly 1029. If we don't get one of the Hold, if we don't get one of the 3 targets for receiver, Tanook Hines is off the board already. In the class that with a very good year of receiver production, we can maybe get one of those back in the fold later this year. I'll buy that. And if you're on the board, which you are, you'll know what I've said about that one. So I'll buy that one. Reese's and Pieces, number 1, buy Hold. Bama is a perennial contender, but never wins a championship under Kalen DeBoer. I'm selling that. I mean, Kalen DeBoer had Washington in the title game last year. If he can get Washington in the title game, he can get Alabama in the title game. So I'm selling that one. Number 2, Sam Pittman, who's the Arkansas head coach, and Billy Napier, the Florida coach, do enough to keep his job this season. I'm going to sell both of them, but I could buy the idea that one of the two will do that. I could see one of them outplaying expectations or out coaching expectations and thriving. So, maybe one of them does, but the two of them, no. There's a much better chance they both get fired than they both keep their jobs. So I'm selling that one as well. Reese's and Pieces, number 3, buy, sell, hold. Oklahoma keeps Texas out of the SEC championship. I'm selling that. I think Texas is going to smack Oklahoma this year. They got a little payback coming, and they just got a much better roster. And it's a neutral field. I think last year was a little bit fluky. Texas had a really bad injury to their center early in the game, and they just could not get their O-line going after that, which you just don't want to lose a center. And to me, the quarterback and center are the 2 positions you don't want to lose a guy in the middle of a game. You just don't. It's so important to have that continuity together. And they still almost won that game. This game, to me, is going to look a lot more like the game 2 years ago than last year, in my opinion. So I'm going to sell that. Number 4, LSU is kept out of the playoffs, and the media performs the ultimate cover-up on how Kelly actually overperformed this team. Oh, buy that for sure. Absolutely buy that. 100% buy that. Oh, they'll make all types of excuses. Oh, guy inherited 39 players in year 3. He still did this, this, and this. Yes. Oh, yes. I already see that on Twitter from LSU fans. Oh, absolutely. A tonsil. Buy or sell, hold. Quarterback play is the real key to wide receiver recruiting. Buy. Yeah, I buy that for sure. Also, wide receiver recruits want to see Mike Brown's vision play out on the field first. Also buy that. Like, people have to understand, Andre, there's a lot of fans that say, well, this guy did this at LSU or Cincinnati or whatever. And honestly, guys, recruits don't look at it that way. They really don't. It's, but Notre Dame has struggled, and you're now at Notre Dame. That's how they look at it. And that's because that's what coaches tell them, and they're convinced by it. So, I think quarterback play being good and seeing the results of what Mike Brown is doing as a coach play out on the field, absolutely very, very important. Absolutely very important. We are Notre Dame. The ACC and the Big 12 gets 2 teams in the college football playoff. Whew, that one. Let me think about that one for a second. 2. I think the ACC gets 2. Can the Big 12? You know what? I'm going to buy that. I think there's going to be some crazy. I'm going to buy that because I've said I think the SEC and Big 10 are going to eat themselves up a little bit. I'll buy that. So you'd have, let's say you have 3 from the ACC or the SEC, 3 from the Big 10 on average. You'd have 1 group of 5, 1 Notre Dame. That's 8. And so you have 4 spots left. Could you? Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. Buy, sell, hold. Ryan Day will be the coach at Ohio State next year. I'll buy that also. Buy, sell, hold. SMU will finish the season in the top 25 this season. Let me pull up SMU's schedule because I do like what Rhett Lashley is doing, but I think their schedule is a lot tougher this year than it has been in past seasons. But let me just go to it real quick. So SMU this year, they play Nevada at home on the road start. That's a win. They play Houston Christian. That's a win. It's BYU at home. Let's just give them a win there. TCU at home. I'll even give them a win for that one just because, but I don't think that game's – I could see them losing one of those 2 games. Let's just say they do win the first 4. They're 4-0. They're in the top 25. Okay. Lose at home to Florida State, lose at Louisville in back-to-back games. That drops them to 4-2. That knocks them out. A bye week. And you have back-to-back road games against Stanford and Cal. If they can win those 2 games, they will finish in the top 25. So if you can beat BYU and TCU at the beginning, and if you go in back-to-back road games against Stanford and Duke, then I think you've got a shot to be in there because the rest of their schedule is favorable. Pitt at home, BC at home, Cal at home, at Virginia. You could win all those games. So it's certainly possible. I think they have a shot at it. The thing about them too is their defense was actually pretty good last year. I think they held opponents like 15 points a game last year. And I like their quarterback, Preston Stone. I don't know that their weapons and skill is as good as it was a few years ago. That could be the holdup. But we'll finish in the top 25. I'll buy that. I'll have boy, it's tough. Yeah, I'll buy that. Just I'm in a good mood. I like SMU. I like what Rhett Lashley's doing. So I'll buy that. I'll buy that one. So so that's it. That's going to do it, everybody. So that's it for today's show. I want to appreciate y'all being with me today. I had fun today. Enjoyed myself talking a little running back play and also talking about having our buy sell hold. You guys bring so many great submissions. I didn't even get them all in today because I knew we had to be out here closer to 4:00. So there were some that I couldn't bring them all in. But so that's why some are on the cutting room floor because we just couldn't do all of them today. But there were so many great ones. You guys are doing a great job of that. I'll be back tomorrow for a mailbag. I'll be doing a solo mailbag tomorrow, so I'll probably get the show up a little bit earlier, probably around 11:30. So that way you guys can get some questions in early, and we'll be rocking and rolling because it'll be a little harder for me to star them once the show gets going. So be ready for that for tomorrow. Tonight, you have IB Nation Sports Talk is going to go live at 6 o'clock. They will do their we in, we out. So if you're a board member and you want to get some we in, some we out questions, there's time to do that. You have another hour and 45 minutes to get some of those in. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com if you're a premium member and get your we in, we out submissions in there as well. If maybe there was a buy-sell hold that we didn't get to, go ahead and present it in a different format for them for their we in, we out, and they'll try to get to that tonight. So enjoy that. So, hey, folks, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com as a way to support what we're doing at this channel and with this entity. And, of course, as always, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.